Chapter 2595. Yi Qinghan knew how to repay kindness. If it wasn't for the 9-heaven Xian immortal, he wouldn't have achieved what he had today. The 9-heaven Xian immortal slowly walked forward and said calmly, "This has nothing to do with me. It's purely your own effort." Yi Qinghan was curious as to why the Taijiang celestial race would be interested in the 9-heaven Xian immortal. Shouldn't they only be interested in the primordial celestial race or the top 10 bloodlines? But he didn't sense any celestial bloodline flowing in the 9-heaven Xian immortal. Yi Qinghan looked at the 9-heaven Xian immortal from the corner of his eyes. He didn't want to become enemies in the future, so he asked, "You are from the primordial celestial race?" The 9-heaven Xian immortal nodded as if he didn't want to hide anything. He said directly, "I am from the bloodline of the divine will primordial over God, the legendary divine will primordial over God." Yi Qinghan took a deep breath and looked at the 9-heaven Xian immortal in shock. If the 9-heaven Xian immortal was an ordinary primordial celestial race member, it would be fine. But he was a primordial over God's inheritor? "What do you think of the Yen race?" Yi Qinghan probed. The 9-heaven Xian immortal was surprised and he carefully looked at Yi Qinghan. But his bloodline was suppressed by the shroud, so he couldn't see anything. "You know about the Yen race?" "That shouldn't be the case. But I don't have much hatred towards the Yen race. My bloodline has just been awakened not long ago and it was just a chaotic battle. There is no hatred between us and I am not interested in what happened back then. So to me, the Yen race is just a dead race. Even if someone from the Yen race appears before me in the future, I will not take the initiative to attack." Yi Qinghan let out a breath of relief and he couldn't help but be impressed by the 9-heaven Xian immortal's control over his bloodline. The 9-heaven Xian immortal seemed to have sensed Yi Qinghan's emotions and asked, "Are you from the Yen race?" Cough cough Yi Qinghan immediately coughed and softly said, "Let's return to the heaven-suppressing palace first. Of course, no matter who I am, I don't want to be your enemy. I hope you do too." The 9-heaven Xian Tian said Tian Tu's to Yi Qinghan said heard immortal to go to the palace. "City." Yi Qinghan bowed slightly and said, "Heaven suppression marquis greets the king." "There's no need to stand on ceremony," Xinyuan Hongshan said, overjoyed. "There's no need to be so formal. Come with me into the imperial city. This emperor wants to reward you well. Right now, the celestial nation is completely supported by the 2 great sages from the crazed manor. If I don't reward them, I'll feel embarrassed. Since you're here today, you can be my witness." Xinyuan Hongshan didn't know the 9-heaven Xian immortal, or at least, he didn't know that she was the daughter of the ancient heavenly monarch. The other primordial kings didn't know either. But when Marquis Ping Yang saw the 9-heaven Xian immortal, he immediately bowed and said, "Greetings, 9-heaven Xian immortal. I didn't know your highness was here, so please forgive me." Only then did Xinyuan Hongshan notice the 9-heavens Xian immortal beside Yi Qinghan. He was shocked. Marquis Pingyang was a first-grade marquis and a third-degree realm cultivator. Although he had just entered the third-degree realm, he was still a third-degree realm cultivator. What kind of realm was a 9-heavens Xian immortal? Was he a peak Xian immortal? Even if 9-heaven Xian immortal was about to enter the golden immortal realm, she wasn't qualified for Marquis Pingyang to bow. Xinyuan Hongshan thought that the 9-heaven Xian immortal would be flattered, but she only nodded calmly and didn't even reply. Xinyuan Hongshan looked at Yi Qinghan, as if he wanted to ask about the 9-heaven Xian immortal's identity. Yi Qinghan smiled and said, "Let me introduce everyone. This is the daughter of the ancient heavenly monarch, Her Highness Gu Jidin." Yi Qinghan looked at the 9-heaven Xian immortal and bowed. "You must know them, right? I won't say much." The 9-heaven Xian immortal might not be very famous, but who didn't know the ancient heavenly monarch? Xinyuan Hongshan was a country lord, but he didn't dare to be impudent in front of the ancient heavenly monarch. "So it's Her Highness Jiutian." Hongshan didn't know, "Please forgive me." Xinyuan Hongshan immediately bowed. "Country Lord Hongshan, you don't have to be so courteous. I don't need this identity, just treat me as an ordinary person." The 9-heaven Xian immortal said calmly. Outside the royal city, The 4 primordial kings and the flame concubine noticed the 9 heaven Xian immortal. Because of the bloodline suppression of the ancient gods, they could sense the 9 heaven Xian immortals' identity more easily than Yi Qinghan. At this moment, the 5 of them felt their blood flow stagnate, and their bodies trembled. This was the suppression of the bloodline, and it was fundamentally different from Yi Qinghan's hatred sense. Plop. After the 5 of them sensed the 9 heaven Xian immortals' identity, they immediately knelt in front of her. Their foreheads were covered in cold sweat, and they were even more flustered than when they saw the country lord. Subordinate wood god priest Mu Chengtian greets the successor of the master god. Subordinate fire god priest Tang Jiayao greets the successor of the master god. The 5 of them didn't dare to raise their heads to look at the successor of the master god. This difference in status was like a mortal looking at their emperor. It was a complete suppression. Xianyuan Hongqian and Marquis Pingyang were also shocked. They didn't expect Gu Jiutian to have such an identity. The successor of the master god? The 6 successors of the master gods had all disappeared, and this was the first successor of the master god bloodline that was discovered. Her status was high, even higher than Xianyuan Hongqian, the country lord. Unless they met the successor of the primordial immortal emperor, no one could compare to her. Are you sure you didn't sense it wrongly? Marquis Pingyang was shocked. If Gu Jiutian had the bloodline of the master god, how could the ancient heavenly emperor let her roam the world? The 4 primordial immortal kings and Tang Jiayao shook their heads. This was the contract between the ancient gods. The master god would always be the master god, and the subordinate gods would always be the subordinate gods. The difference in status was thousands of miles. The 2 of you, please enter the main palace. Xianyuan Hongqian seemed to see an opportunity and immediately bowed and extended his hand, lowering his posture. Gu Jiutian looked at the 5 successors of the primordial immortal god bloodline and said in a crisp voice, "Rise." With that, Yi Qinghan, Xianyuan Hongqian, and Gu Jiutian stepped into the inner city. Even Marquis Pingyang could only extend his hand, let alone the other marquises. The group passed by the main road, and the citizens all knelt down, cheering for the country lord and heaven-suppressing marquis. The current heaven-suppressing marquis reputation shook the heavens, and his power was close to the country lord's. He could calm the hearts of the people with one move, and he represented the country lord. Yi Qinghan didn't feel his blood boiling because he was only protecting the 9 states, the immortal world. He wasn't the savior, and he couldn't be one. The group quickly entered the inner city, where the royal uncles and princes gathered. There were almost no outsiders, so there were very few people. The group quickly entered the imperial city and went straight to the main palace. Xianyuan Hongqian didn't dare to sit in the main seat anymore. He ordered a round table and had Marquis Pingyang accompany him to personally entertain Yi Qinghan and Gu Jiutian. Seeing Xianyuan Hongqian's attitude, Yi Qinghan felt much better. After all, Xianyuan Hongqian didn't kick him to the curb like the other royal family members. The 2 of you must stay in the inner city for a while so that I can properly entertain you, Xianyuan Hongqian said with a smile. Yi Qinghan shook his head and smiled bitterly. Your Majesty, please don't make things difficult for me. I've offended the Taijiang Celestial clan, and they just sent assassins to assassinate me. I'm worried that if I'm not in the heaven-suppressing palace, there will be experts appearing. My crazed palace might not be able to stop them. Today, I came to the imperial capital to reassure you all, and also to ask the Lord to give me another heaven-suppressing marquis robe. Chapter 2596. It wasn't easy to get the conferred marquis robe as its materials were all personally prepared by the immortal monarch and no one knew if the master had any extra. Xianyuan Hongqian was in a difficult position as even he didn't have a defensive armor like the conferred marquis robe. I'm afraid we'll have to ask the master. Why don't you go and ask him yourself? Xianyuan Hongqian smiled bitterly. Yi Qinghan nodded and said softly, Your Majesty, there's no need to be so courteous. I'll go to the master first. After all, the heaven-suppressing palace needs me. Please don't mind. All right, then you can go after this meal. I won't be visiting my aunt. Xianyuan Hongqian replied. Yi Qinghan stopped being courteous and finished all the immortal wine and food that replenished his blood energy. The fatigue in his body was all gone. Tang Jiyao stared at Yi Qinghan unhappily. She wanted to find evidence that Yi Qinghan was from the Yen race, but the baleful aura on the shroud was too strong. She could feel the pressure and baleful aura from far away, and it had completely blocked the Yen race's blood energy. The four primordial kings stood far away, not daring to get too close to Gu Jiutian. Perhaps Gu Jiutian wasn't suited for this kind of occasion, so he only ate a few bites and drank some immortal tea before sitting down to wait for Yi Qinghan. When Yi Qinghan saw Gu Jiutian no longer eating, he put down his bowl and chopsticks and said, "Your Majesty, Senior Marquis Ping Yang, please enjoy your meal. His Majesty Jiutian and I will take our leave first. We'll come back to visit you too when we're free." Xianyuan Hongchen and Marquis Ping Yang did not dare to put on airs and immediately stood up to send Yi Qinghan out of the inner city. Yi Qinghan brought Gu Jiutian and quickly entered the royal clothing workshop. When the people in the workshop saw Yi Qinghan, they immediately led him to the elder hall, and an elder personally went to inform the workshop master. The workshop master was sitting cross-legged in the pavilion, still studying the inverse space galaxy diagram. After being disturbed, he woke up. "What's the matter?" The owner pushed open the door and looked at the elder as he asked indifferently, "My lord, the heaven-suppressing marquis is here. He even brought a female cultivator at the perfection stage of the profound immortal realm with him. Would you like to meet them?" The elder asked respectfully. The district mistress was expressionless, but her overflowing beauty still caused the world to lose its color. "Tell heaven-suppressing marquis to come see me. As for that female cultivator, her status is extraordinary. Treat her well." The owner's divine sense covered the entire workshop. The elder quickly bowed and retreated. The district mistress returned to the pavilion and tapped on the railing with her fingertips. Her temperament was otherworldly, and even the Milky Way was a foil to her. How did this little guy repair this place so quickly? He forced the Taijiang high priest to use all of his trump cards and fell to the ground. Even I have to recuperate for 1,000 years, but he is actually alive and kicking in just a few decades. The owner thought secretly and felt that something was wrong. A moment later, the sound of steady footsteps came from outside the door. "Come in directly," the boss said without even turning his head. Yi Qinghan pushed the door and entered. The baleful aura of the shroud spoiled the atmosphere and almost washed away the aura of the owner. The owner turned to frown at Yi Qinghan and snorted, "Can you not wear this shroud when you come to see me? It's wrapped around a dead person for countless years, and you actually don't feel disgusted by it." Yi Qinghan smiled embarrassedly and bowed, "District mistress, you must be joking. This junior is afraid of death." The heaven-suppressing marquis robe was broken during the battle with the Taijiang high priest. "I don't have a suitable battle robe, so I can only walk around with it." The owner seemed to have seen through Yi Qinghan's purpose for coming here and said calmly, "If you want the heaven-suppressing marquis robe, just say it. There's no need to use the shroud to disgust me." Yi Qinghan smiled wryly. He didn't wear the shroud to disgust the owner. He didn't have the guts to do so. "District mistress, please don't say that. I'm really just trying to save my life, not to disgust you. Even if you give me 3 guts, I wouldn't dare." Yi Qinghan spoke the truth. The owner's voluptuous figure was filled with charm. Yi Qinghan didn't dare to look straight at her. This kind of woman was born to make men have evil thoughts. She stood proudly with her chest out and looked down at Yi Qinghan. She no longer paid attention to the shroud and coldly asked, "How is your cultivation of the inverse space galaxy diagram going?" "I've just started. Thank you for your concern, district mistress." Yi Qinghan quickly bowed and said, "Heaven-suppressing marquis, aren't you quite arrogant? Don't you feel tired bowing while looking up at this consort?" The owner frowned and asked. Cold sweat appeared on Yi Qinghan's forehead. There probably wasn't a young man in this world who wouldn't be shocked when looking directly at the owner. That was a problem with one's mental state. Her appearance and temperament could disturb one's mental state, not to mention that her cultivation had already stabilized at the 4th state. However, the owner coldly looked at Yi Qinghan, forcing him to raise his head. Yi Qinghan looked up at the owner and didn't know where to place his hands. Look into this consort's eyes and tell me, how did you recover so quickly after suffering such heavy injuries? The owner asked indifferently. Yi Qinghan reacted extremely quickly and immediately replied, I'm gifted and have a very fast self-recovery ability. Bullshit. You're lying to this consort. Do you believe that I won't rip off your shroud? The owner directly reprimanded. Yi Qinghan's mouth twitched. If he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have come to ask for the heaven-suppressing marquee robe. Yi Qinghan took a few deep breaths and racked his brains to think of a way to cover up this lie. However, he really couldn't find a better excuse. I obtained an immemorial godly treasure that helped me recover from my injuries. I was afraid that someone would take it away, so I didn't dare to reveal it. Yi Qinghan pretended to be calm and said. The owner snorted as if she could see through Yi Qinghan's essence. Immortal Emperor Qingzun could see through Yi Qinghan's identity. Although the owner wasn't a supreme immortal emperor, she was at least in existence in the fourth state. Therefore, she felt that Yi Qinghan was still lying. I'll give you one more chance to reorganize your words. The owner lightly stepped to Yi Qinghan's side and pinched Yi Qinghan's chin with her jade hand. She proudly said, No one has ever dared to lie in front of me, but you've lied to me twice in a row. Do you think that I won't dare to teach you a lesson? Yi Qinghan's eyelids twitched. He didn't expect the owner to be so curious. She was prepared to get to the bottom of this. If I say that I'm the Yen clan's inheritor, will you kill me? Yi Qinghan's fingertips trembled as he asked softly. The owner stared intently at Yi Qinghan. Her jade-like hand slid down and landed on the shroud at the bottom of his throat. With a light tap, she deftly unbuttoned Yi Qinghan's clothes. Yi Qinghan's hair stood on end as his blood flowed in reverse. He wanted to retreat but didn't dare to. He looked at the owner with an awkward expression. Whoosh! The shroud fell off and Yi Qinghan was only left with a thin nightgown. His strong body was exposed and the curves of his body were clearly visible. The owner's lips curled up slightly. She didn't feel embarrassed at all. Her jade hand slid across the thin nightgown and the top automatically fell off. The explosive muscles on his body were bronze in color and there were many shocking scars. Some of them couldn't even heal. Every scar represented a battle achievement and also explained his wild and ferocious nature. The Yen clan's bloodline was surging and they were extremely vigilant. Unfortunately, Yi Qinghan was already powerless to resist because the heaven-suppressing blade was already in the owner's hands. You really are from the Yen clan. The owner didn't seem surprised and only said lightly. Yi Qinghan watched as the owner's jade hand slid across his scars. His entire body tensed up and goosebumps appeared on his skin. He smiled bitterly and said, Owner, my friendship with your clan is real. It has nothing to do with bloodline. I don't plan to take revenge for the hatred from back then. I'll just let time fade away. Chapter 2597. Yi Qinghan planned to let go of his hatred, but no one knew if the owner was willing to do so. The owner smiled sweetly and slid her gaze across the scar on Yi Qinghan's chest. It was like a bolt of lightning that swam through his entire body, causing him to tremble. Even with his monstrous cultivation base, he did not dare to sneak up on her. You may want to let go, but others may not. A blood feud can't be forgotten with time. Even if you want to, the bloodline inheritance in your soul won't. If you don't believe me, take a look. The owner smiled gently. The ancient bloodline in her body awakened, and the aura of the entire pavilion changed instantly. Whoosh! Boomed at the Yen clan's bloodline boiled instantly. That enmity filled with heartache. Yi Qinghan looked at the owner and his body tensed up. Thud thud thud, Yi Qinghan took several steps back. His face was ashen and his fingertips trembled uncontrollably. The primal chaos in his body was summoned out involuntarily. The owner smiled faintly and said calmly, Do you see? The hatred does not come from your control, but from the consciousness of your soul. It comes from the bloodline inheritance in your soul. We are not ordinary people. We have the inheritance. Huff huff huff. Dong dong dong. Yi Qinghan's heartbeat quickened and his breathing quickened. Cold sweat dripped from his forehead. He did not even blink as he stared into the owner's eyes. That fear came from the subconscious of his soul, And there was even a strong hatred. It's not just me. There's also Gu Jiutian. No matter how well she hides the overgod bloodline in her body, when she becomes a overgod in the future, she won't be able to suppress it. At least, no matter how well she suppresses it, you can feel it. There's no shroud that can wipe away the bloodline and might of a overgod, the owner said calmly. I can choose to retreat. Yi Qinghan said firmly, the hatred of the ancient times has nothing to do with me. This subconscious hatred has nothing to do with me. I don't even understand why I have the Yen clan's bloodline. This inheritance of hatred from the soul should not exist without my permission. It's useless to complain to me. You just have to remember that you can't let Qingyun cultivate anymore. Otherwise, her bloodline will awaken sooner or later. At that time, how will the two of you interact in the future? Yi Qinghan was startled. Making a cultivator stop cultivating was equivalent to wiping away her sustenance. It was too cruel. If this is cruel, compared to losing you, she might find it even more cruel, said the owner coldly. Yi Qinghan sighed, bowed and said, I will let her choose for herself. Thank you for your reminder. The pavilion was deathly silent. It was only after the owner concealed his bloodline power that Yi Qinghan was able to catch his breath. Put it on. The owner used the heaven-suppressing blade to pick up the shroud and threw it to Yi Qinghan. She lightly reminded, before you cultivate to the third stage realm, don't let this shroud leave your body. This shroud is enough to suppress bloodlines below the third stage realm. The reason why you can wear it is because it was refined by someone in the fourth stage. The Yen clan still has someone in the fourth stage alive. It seems like the storm is far more terrifying than we imagined. The owner was already comparable to the current immortal emperor. As long as she completely controlled the inverse space galaxy diagram, she would be able to ascend to the level of the ancient immortal emperor. She would be invincible and be comparable to the 6 master gods. Perhaps she would be the 7th master god, the star master god. At this moment, she was very observant. Nothing could escape her eyes. Yi Qinghan's lips were dry. He was afraid of the owner. She was far more terrifying than the Taijiang high priest. Hua! The owner raised her hand and returned the heaven-suppressing blade to Yi Qinghan. The heaven-suppressing blade that was as heavy as a star was as light as a feather in her hands. Yi Qinghan put on the shroud and received the heaven-suppressing blade with both hands. At this moment, the owner no longer pressured him by her temperament and beauty, but by her bloodline. This woman was too terrifying. It was better to keep a distance from her in the future. The owner smiled sweetly. She looked at Yi Qinghan's cautious appearance. She stretched out her slender finger and gently lifted Yi Qinghan's chin. She charmingly said, I didn't think that the heaven-suppressing marquis who represents D suppressing the heavens would also have a time when he isn't arrogant. Yi Qinghan had never been teased by a woman like this before. The key was that the number 1 beauty of the Qingzun immortal empire was also very helpless at this moment. The main thing is that I can't beat you, so I don't dare to be arrogant. Yi Qinghan had been holding it in for a long time. He was very unwilling to accept this. The owner asked back with interest, if you can beat me one day, will you dare to be arrogant in front of me? Yi Qinghan smiled embarrassedly, I wouldn't dare. After all, you are still my aunt, aren't you? It would be weird if he didn't dare. Only the divine bird knew that as long as he could beat her, he would have to tease her back. But now that he couldn't beat her, he could only pretend to be her grandson. These two were the same type of people, as expected of a master and servant. Since you call me aunt, I will not be stingy. Wait for a month in the imperial capital, or go back and wait for Marquis Pingyang to give you the conferred Marquis robe. This time, I have prepared the complete inverse space galaxy diagram for you. Study it well. You don't have much time left. The owner nodded in satisfaction. Yi Qinghan rubbed his hands and said gratefully, Thank you, auntie, thank you, auntie. Then, I'll go check on Qingyun first before returning to the heaven-suppressing prefecture. There are no experts there, I'm worried. The owner nodded and did not ask him to stay. Yi Qinghan did not dare to stay for long. After getting permission, he immediately turned and ran out of the pavilion. Seeing Yi Qinghan leaving, the owner's eyelids twitched. She rubbed her fingers together and her eyes shone brighter than the stars. Her voluptuous body was very tempting. But with such beauty, she was probably not someone with the cultivation level of a primordial celestial emperor. No one was qualified to enjoy such beauty. I really didn't expect him to be from the Yen clan. There is even a fourth form Yen clan super expert behind him. If I kill him, the fourth form Yen clan super expert will definitely appear and seek revenge. The owner mumbled to herself. It was not that she did not want to kill Yi Qinghan, but she could not do so now. Not only was she afraid of revenge, she was also afraid of the celestial empire collapsing. A heaven-suppressing marquis to replace Di Zhentian and his Kuang manor. There were two military great sages guarding the north and south respectively. If the Kuang manor fell, so would the Qingzun immortal empire. The owner's considerations were very comprehensive, but the hatred from the soul inheritance made her unable to fully trust Yi Qinghan. How did this happen? Did the great immortal emperor not notice? Why did he let him replace Di Zhentian? The owner sighed and clenched her fists. The stars within thousands of miles surged with her emotions. Yi Qinghan brought Gu Jiutian out of the imperial clothing workshop. His entire body was drenched in cold sweat. Gu Jiutian looked at Yi Qinghan in shock and asked, "What happened? Why do I feel like you saw a ghost?" Yi Qinghan shuddered and swallowed his saliva. He said hoarsely, "If I saw a ghost, I wouldn't be so scared. The key is that this person is even scarier than a ghost." "You're talking about the owner? What's her cultivation level?" Gu Jiutian asked. Yi Qinghan exhaled and lowered his voice. "Fourth form, and it's already very stable. It's comparable to the current immortal emperor. Although I don't know what your father's cultivation level is, I'm sure that she's definitely not weaker than the ancient heavenly emperor." Gu Jiutian went silent for a moment and didn't say anything. There were so many experts in the world. There were countless people like the owner who lived in seclusion. There were also many who survived the immemorial battlefield. However, those people were no longer in trouble. Some even lived in seclusion in the ancient immortal world, Void Ridge and other dangerous places. No one could bother them. Chapter 2598. Yi Qinghan and Yi Qinghan walked side by side to Princess Qingyun's residence. The guards all knew who Yi Qinghan was and they immediately bowed and led him into the residence. Xianyuan Qingyun and Xianyuan Lingjun were hostages. Although they did not say anything on the surface, everyone knew that Yan Ao and Yi Qinghan controlled the celestial nation's lifeline. If their family members were in the heaven-suppressing prefecture, no one could guarantee that they would not lose control. Yan Ao and Yi Qinghan knew the rules, so they did not take the initiative to bring the two away. Instead, they arranged for them to stay in the imperial capital. After the two entered the residence, Xianyuan Qingyun received the news and she excitedly ran into Yi Qinghan's arms. She was like a little bird, reuniting after a long time as if they were newlyweds. Yi Qinghan smiled gently and patted Xianyuan Qingyun's shoulder. He slowly separated his arms and pointed at Gu Jiutian. "Qingyun, let me introduce you to His Highness Jiutian. Back then, he helped me escape from her 9 heavens great world. He was also the one who allowed me to go to the ancient Emperor Academy. He is my savior." Xianyuan Qingyun looked at Gu Jiutian with a face full of happiness. She bowed slightly and said, "Qingyun greets your Highness Jiutian. Thank you for saving my life." Gu Jiutian smiled and nodded. "There is no need to be so formal. Just treat me as an ordinary person. Since you two have reunited after such a long time, I shall not disturb you two. I will just look around the residence." With that, Gu Jiutian turned and left, walking in the residence's garden. Yi Qinghan looked at Xianyuan Qingyun's flushed face and couldn't help but sigh. He pulled Xianyuan Qingyun and whispered, "Qingyun, is cultivation important to you?" Of course it is important. My cultivation is so low, I can't even help in this chaotic world. I also want to have power like yours," Xianyuan Qingyun said in a serious tone. Yi Qinghan looked at Xianyuan Qingyun's hopeful eyes. He really couldn't bear to let her give up on cultivation. He could understand the feeling of wanting to be invincible, but having one's cultivation suddenly stopped. It was very helpless, and very despairing. Yi Qinghan lowered his voice and asked hoarsely, I'm just saying I wish for you to stop cultivating. Will you accept? Xianyuan Qingyun's eyes instantly widened. She looked at Yi Qinghan in disbelief. She couldn't understand why he would make such a decision. Stop cultivating? Xianyuan Qingyun cried out involuntarily as she lost control of her emotions. She raised her head to look at Yi Qinghan, hoping for an explanation. Yi Qinghan thought for a long time and then said in a low voice, Our bloodlines clash. If you continue to cultivate, it is very likely that we will become enemies. Xianyuan Qingyun felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave. She had never expected such a situation to occur. If their bloodlines really clashed, then wouldn't she have to choose between cultivation and her husband? Think about it first. Your cultivation is still very low right now. Once you awaken your bloodline, we won't be able to meet again. Yi Qinghan said in a low voice, I won't force you. If you choose to cultivate, then I will cooperate with you. I definitely won't let you lose face. Xianyuan Qingyun almost fell to the ground. Her entire body was powerless, and her eyes were filled with despair. In terms of age and cultivation, Xianyuan Qingyun was much younger than Yi Qinghan. She had already reached the early stage of the eternal heavenly immortal realm and could be considered a little genius. She had great hopes for cultivation. If she were to give up now, it would indeed be too cruel. Yi Qinghan was also filled with regret. What a pity! If he had known that day, he would have rather rejected this marriage. Yi Qinghan patted Xianyuan Qingyun's shoulder lightly and said in a gentle voice, I absolutely won't force you. Go as your heart desires. With that, Yi Qinghan supported Xianyuan Qingyun into the inner residence. Xianyuan Qingyun sat on the chair in despair. She could not muster any strength at all. She leaned her head on Yi Qinghan's shoulder as she stared blankly at the door. Is there no other way? Xianyuan Qingyun asked weakly. Since the owner's aunt said so, then there should be no other way, Yi Qinghan replied with a bitter smile. Xianyuan Qingyun clearly knew that if she gave up on cultivation, she would be a burden and would not be of any use. Perhaps it was nothing now, but once Yi Qinghan ascended to the heavens, she would be alone for the rest of her life. She would not even be able to hold onto her trousers. Within the residence, the two of them remained silent for a very long time. Xianyuan Qingyun was also a smart person. If she gave up on cultivation, she would have nothing. If she gave up on Yi Qinghan, she might still have a chance in the future. After a long time, Xianyuan Qingyun raised her head and looked at Yi Qinghan. She said softly, Husband, I'm sorry. I've chosen to temporarily give up on our relationship. It's not that I don't love you, but I don't want to lose you forever in the future. I believe that the heavens will always leave a way out. I will find a solution in the future. With that, Xianyuan Qingyun stood up and secretly wiped away her tears behind Yi Qinghan's back. She pretended to be strong as she turned her head and smiled. Believe me, I can do it. Yi Qinghan felt a bit sour in his heart. How could he not understand Xianyuan Qingyun's thoughts? Temporarily giving up on him was not because she did not love him enough, but because she loved him to the point of madness. Previously, Xianyuan Qingyun had done her best to help Yi Qinghan. Now that she had made such a decision, Yi Qinghan felt extremely guilty. He held Xianyuan Qingyun's lily-white hand and said in a deep voice, I will definitely return what I owe you in the future. Even if I can't return it from you, I will return it to the celestial nation. I understand you, and I understand you. There's no need to say any more. We will meet again in the celestial emperor realm. Xianyuan Qingyun said with a fake smile. Celestial emperor realm. Yi Qinghan looked at Xianyuan Qingyun's determined expression and nodded. Then let's meet again in the celestial emperor realm. At that level, perhaps we can change the bloodline inheritance. You can go back. I will go see my aunt. Xianyuan Qingyun said firmly. With that, Xianyuan Qingyun left the inner palace, leaving Yi Qinghan standing in the palace, feeling very powerless. Yi Qinghan looked at Xianyuan Qingyun's back and sighed inwardly. He clenched his fist and left the palace as well. Gu Jiutian was waiting outside the palace. He said plainly, It seems like the negotiation did not go well. Yi Qinghan nodded, but then shook his head. Xinyuan Qingyun's choice was not good, but it was not bad either. Relatively speaking, her choice to separate for a period of time was much better than blindly separating. Let's return to the heaven-suppressing prefecture. Yi Qinghan muttered before leaving the inner city with Gu Jiutian. As soon as they were out of the inner city, they took off into the air. They moved extremely quickly and left the imperial city in the blink of an eye. Once they left the imperial city, the two were even faster. They chased after each other, reversing time and space. It was as if even time was moving backward. Time flew by, but it was not as fast as the two's speed. In the Martial Record System's headquarters, Yan Yunbei was generously rewarded by Luo Wuhan. The cultivation techniques he learned were all ancient supreme immortal arts, allowing his cultivation to improve rapidly. Luo Wuhan even provided enough immortal pellets and insights to speed up the cultivation of a golden immortal. In today's war, the side with the most experts would be the victor. The Martial Record System was a business. Even if they did not participate in the war, they would not allow other factions to touch their assets. Clearly, the Martial Record System did not only nurture Yan Yunbei. There were others as well. Some of them were experts on the heaven ranking, but some were not so famous that no one would know of them. On this day, Luo Wuhan received a message and went straight to Yan Yunbei. "Yunbei, come with me," Luo Wuhan said solemnly. Yan Yunbei opened his eyes and looked at Luo Wuhan. He calmly asked, "Where to?" "A place with treasures. If there are no accidents, we might find a primordial godhead," Luo Wuhan said with a smile. There were many primordial godheads in the immemorial era. However, many of the subsidiary gods lost their godheads, leaving behind the extremely powerful primordial gods scattered their godheads in the ancient immortal world, everlasting immortal world, and various battlefields. Chapter 2599. It might be a primordial quintessence. This news shocked Yan Yunbei greatly. This kind of primordial godhead was refined by a supreme expert with the ultimate meaning of the origin and law. It could not be destroyed unless one reached a certain level. If one could refine the primordial godhead, one could become a primordial god in just a few 100,000 years. His battle strength would definitely be far beyond the second stage of Golden Immortal. If he could refine the primordial godhead of a primordial divine general, he would be comparable to an expert in the fourth stage or even beyond that. However, the quintessence of a primordial divine general or a primordial divine priest was not easy to refine. Some people who had such quintessence could not refine it for hundreds of thousands or even millions of years. For example, the Taijiang High Priest had the quintessence of a primordial divine general for many years, but he still could not understand the divine essence within. Yan Yunbei immediately stood up and said, "Then let's go. Let's go to the North Sea. There are spies planted by other forces in the martial arts record system. Don't inform anyone for now. It's just the two of us this time," Luo Wuhan whispered. The two of them quickly left the headquarters and headed north as fast as lightning, quickly disappearing from everyone's line of sight. Half a month later, the two's speed reached its peak. They circled around the North Divine region and headed straight for the North Divine Island. "That little bird is a treasure hunter? We'll bring Yi Qinghan and that little bird. It's a primordial ruin. It's not easy for us to find it. Since they're your friends, they can share some of the loot. As long as the primordial quintessence is ours, it's fine," Luo Wuhan said as they approached the North Divine Island. Yan Yunbei naturally had no objections. Supremacy Ye's luck was unusually good. Bringing him along would definitely benefit them. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The two sped up and swooped down from the North Sea to the North Divine Island. In just a few hours, they had crossed tens of thousands of miles. At this time, Yi Qinghan and Gu Jiutian had already arrived at the sky-gazing peak on the North Divine Island. When the two appeared in the sky, the fluctuations they emitted alarmed Yi Qinghan. Yi Qinghan looked up at the East Sea. Two meteors fell, heading straight for the Kuang Sek's camp. Yi Qinghan and Gu Jiutian came out together and stood at the top of the sky-gazing mountain, gazing into the distance. Soon Yi Qinghan discovered their identities. He was a little surprised and thought to himself, Why are they here? Haha, heaven-suppressing Marquis, long time no see. Luo Wuhan laughed heartily. Yi Qinghan smiled and bowed. So it's Senior Young Master Luo. Long time no see. Please forgive me for not coming out to greet you. There's no need to be so courteous with me. Today, I've come to find you because I want to make a fortune together. I wonder if you're interested in exploring an ancient battlefield with me? Luo Wuhan descended on the sky-gazing peak and said indifferently. Yan Yunbei followed closely and nodded at Yi Qinghan. There was no need to say anything more between them. I'm very interested in making a fortune. If young Master Luo is willing to take me along, then I'm more than happy to oblige. Yi Qinghan's face was full of interest as he replied immediately. Luo Wuhan looked at Gu Jiutian indifferently and clasped his fists. Your Highness Jiutian, if you're interested, why don't we go together? Clearly, Luo Wuhan and Gu Jiutian knew each other. Even if they weren't close, they were still friends. Gu Jiutian nodded and said, there aren't many ancient battlefield ruins left. I'm naturally interested. Hearing this, Luo Wuhan immediately looked at Yi Qinghan and said, get me your spirit pet, sheep bird. Bring him along. Yi Qinghan shrugged and said with a smile, seems like young Master Luo hasn't been angered enough. Since you want to bring him along, then bring him along. Please wait a moment, let me make the arrangements. With that, Yi Qinghan headed to Insane Sect's encampment. He found Green Lotus Sword Immortal and asked him to inform Sovereign Yi to return to the Northern Divine Island. He also asked Jiang Jingtian, Desolate Lord Yi, Li Feng and the others to lead the 5 million private army back to the Northern Fortress. Now that the chess saint had stabilized his position, he could compete with Reverend Dragon. They were on par with each other. Yi Qinghan would naturally prioritize protecting the heaven-suppressing palace. The news spread quickly and the Lingyang battlefront changed rapidly. The army was constantly mobilized and the Reverend Dragon army was on high alert. Little did Reverend Dragon Marquis know that this was just an order from Yi Qinghan. Soon, the chess saint had the Insane Sect's 5 million private army led by Jiang Jingtian and the other marshals to the north. The army moved swiftly and the Insane Sect's war flag fluttered in the wind. Everywhere they passed, no matter if it was the main cities or the bigger cities, they all took the initiative to provide supplies to increase the army's speed. A few months later, the 7 armies crossed half of the northern fortress. They marched in a straight line and arrived at the northern fortress. Sovereign Yi handed over the command of the army to Yi Chen and brought Huoling Tian to the northern Divine Island. Hee, boss has made such a big deal this time. Is there something big to do? Supreme Yi was wild with joy. He wished he could turn the world upside down. Huoling Tian was still not Insane Sect's confidant. At most, he was Sovereign Ye's follower. He did not dare to judge Insane Sect's boss. You're the boss. You must bring me along if there's something good. Huoling Tian smiled. Sovereign Yi rode on Huoling Tian's neck and said proudly, don't worry. Once you're the boss, you'll be the boss forever. Be my little brother and I'll make sure you'll benefit from it for life. After Huoling Tian received his promise, he sped up and brought Sovereign Yi into the heaven-suppressing palace district. They then headed to the northern Divine Island. At this time, Yi Qinghan and the others were ready to go. Bai Shaoxing, Yan Yunbei, Luo Wuhan, Yi Qinghan and Gu Jiutian were all waiting for Sovereign Yi. Bai Shaoxing was a person with great fortune. As the reincarnation of Bai Zhe, her fortune was not like Sovereign Ye's. Her fortune was very orthodox. All these years, Bai Shaoxing had been cultivating in the inner sect. With great fortune and great talent, although she was not as strong as Yi Qinghan, she had already reached the early level of the mystic immortal realm. She was considered a very strong expert. What a bang! Huoling Tian arrived with Sovereign Yi. Looking at Yi Qinghan and the others, the pressure on him increased and he did not dare to speak carelessly. Xiao. Sovereign Yi ran to Yi Qinghan and asked excitedly, Boss, what good news do you have to share with me? Yi Qinghan gestured for him to look at Luo Wuhan. Yo, if it isn't young Master Luo, the immortal fruits you owe me. Sovereign Yi rubbed his hands and said, Luo Wuhan was speechless and scolded, didn't I give you a lot of things? If you dare to provoke me again, I'll throw you into the northern sea and freeze you. A sovereign Yi shook his head and said in disdain, I don't lack those things. Since you don't want to give them to me, then don't. Luo Wuhan rolled his eyes. He really did not want to bother with Sovereign Yi. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to rely on him to find some treasures, he would rather die than wait for Sovereign Yi. Since everyone is here, let's go. Yi Qinghan said calmly. Hua. Sovereign Yi directly flew to Hua Lingtian's neck and said loudly, let me introduce Hua Lingtian to everyone. He's my new little brother. No matter where I go this time, I will bring him along. Yi Qinghan glanced at Hua Lingtian and did not refute. Luo Wuhan was naturally embarrassed to refute and said, there's strength in numbers. Let's go. The group of 7, including Yi Qinghan and Gu Jiutian, was equivalent to 3 Golden Immortal Realm big shots. The others were also Mystic Immortal Realm experts. Their speed was very fast as they rode the wind and waves and quickly approached the northernmost sea region. Luo Wuhan took out a map and kept changing directions according to the coordinates of the stars. However, in this vast sea, it was really difficult to find a ruin. Chapter 2600. How could there be ancient ruins in the vast ocean? Yi Qinghan didn't believe it. Even if there was, who could discover it? Even a mystic immortal expert might not be able to walk out of the endless ocean alive. Are you sure the map is pointing to the North Sea? Yi Qinghan asked curiously. Luo Wuhan looked at the map and said firmly, I'm sure. I bought this map for 1 billion celestial coins. A mid-level mystic immortal cultivator accidentally entered the ruins. He didn't dare to explore it, so he described a map and sold it to the Martial Record System. Now, everyone who came into contact with this map is temporarily locked up. This map is definitely not fake. Gu Jiutian was an ancient Xian immortal after all. Although she hadn't experienced the primordial war, her cultivation methods were all primordial inheritances. Her mother was also a direct descendant of the divine will master god, so she knew far more about the primordial war than others. Let me see the map. Gu Jiutian gestured with her hand. Luo Wuhan knew Gu Jiutian's identity, but he didn't know that she was an inheritor of the master god. He immediately handed the map to Gu Jiutian. Gu Jiutian took the map and studied it for a while. She flew to several places and looked up at the stars. Looking at the bright night sky, she kept looking for the distance between the stars. Finally, she confirmed a direction. Once in the ancient era, the ancient immortal world was the highest level plane. At least, it was the highest level plane that was discovered at that time. This immortal world was a subsidiary plane of the ancient immortal world. During the ancient war, the ancient immortal world was shattered into pieces, forming the Void Ridge, the ancient immortal world, and the other 4 regions. There are still some missing fragments left in the ocean of the immortal world. If I'm not wrong, the continent marked on the map should be the area that fell from the ancient immortal world. Although it's not as scary as the Void Ridge, it's definitely very dangerous. Gu Jiutian pointed to the northwest, the end of the ocean, and said crisply, have you confirmed the location? Yi Qinghan looked at Gu Jiutian and asked curiously, follow me. It's about a month's journey. Gu Jiutian was almost certain of the true location of the destination on the map. She immediately kept the map and sped above the ocean, braving the wind and waves. Her eyes constantly looked at the stars to determine the direction. The endless North Sea stretched to an unknown place. It was as if it was even larger than the universe. The 7 of them continued their journey. Gu Jiutian kept taking out his map to judge. Finally, after a month and a half, they saw a misty continent. It was covered in fog, and ancient buildings stood proudly. However, they were already in ruins. The majestic and heavy ancient aura was mixed with a murderous aura. Even from far away, one could feel the terrifying things that had happened there. Countless plants had already demonized, and there were some creatures that were even more terrifying than the star-twisting vines. They stretched for thousands of li and devoured enormous archaic beasts. If one entered this place, they would have to be prepared to die at any moment. Screech! A primordial flying beast soared through the sky and streaked across the surface of the sea, causing 2 towering waves to rise. Roar! A series of strange roars warned the world not to enter the ancient ruins as they pleased. The dense murderous intent and murderous aura made one's hair stand on end. Only Supremacy Yi was incomparably excited, rubbing his little hands together as he cried out, "This supremacy is coming! I want to be the emperor of all beasts, I want to." Yi Qinghan unceremoniously slapped the back of his head and snorted. "Stop dreaming! Can't you see the danger here?" At this moment, not to mention the others, even Gu Jiutian, Yi Qinghan, and Luo Wuhan, the big shots, felt their hair stand on end. The danger was heavy, and an ancient beast could appear at any time. Supremacy Yi shrunk his head and looked at the large continent that was dozens of li away. It was like a bottomless pit. Once one entered, they would not return. Everyone said that once one entered the sealed gate, the immortals would not return. It was likely that once one entered this place, even the big shots might not be able to return. Everyone keep a safe distance. This is an ancient ruin. Back then, many gods fought in the ancient immortal world and the subsidiary immortal world. Countless experts fell, and there are also many immortal runes that have yet to erupt. It is very likely that they will be triggered by us. Be careful, Gu Jiutian said in a low voice. Yi Qinghan rushed out of the heaven-suppressing long blade and said to Luo Wuhan, "Young Master Luo, do you want to go first, or should I? You lead the divine bird in front. I will guard the back. I don't have the luck that you guys have to come out of the crying ghost ridge alive," Luo Wuhan said truthfully. Yi Qinghan shrugged and took the initiative to walk forward. At this moment, the divine bird changed back to its original form and squatted on Hua Lingtian's shoulder. Hua Lingtian followed closely beside Yi Qinghan. All the hair on his body stood on end. Before they even got close to this ancient ruin, they already felt the danger of death. Yi Qinghan looked at Hua Lingtian and said indifferently, "Follow me closely. Don't worry, boss. With me here, nothing will happen. We have the divine phoenix bloodline after all. If we can't even deal with some trash, how can we become the emperor of all beasts?" Supremacy Yi said with a sly look. "Will you die if you don't brag?" Yi Qinghan sneered and took the initiative to lead the way. Yi Qinghan took the lead with Gu Jiutian in the middle and Luo Wuhan at the back. They protected by Xiaoxing in the middle. Yan Yunbei was on by Xiaoxing's right and Gu Jiutian was on her left. Anything could happen to anyone but her. Bai Zhe was the person who controlled the fate of a small world. Even though he had come to a high-tier plane, his fate was still much better than people like Yi Qinghan. Hua! Roar! Bang bang bang! The 1,000-foot wave crashed into the ancient ruin. The rocks were especially hard from the impact. Even the heaven-suppressing long blade might not be able to break them in one go. Yi Qinghan took the lead and stepped into the ancient ruin. The moment he landed on the shore, a thick ancient aura rushed towards him. The aura here was completely different from the undying immortal world. The pressure, laws, gravity, and immortal spiritual energy were obviously a level higher than the undying immortal world. If one could cultivate to the first stage of the golden immortal realm here, it would definitely be much more terrifying than the first stage of the undying immortal world. This was the difference between planes. However, if one wanted to cultivate to the first stage here, it would take at least twice as much effort as in the undying immortal world. Hiss. Even the breath was filled with immortal spiritual energy. The laws were even thicker and harder to understand. Even Luo Wuhan couldn't use the profoundness that he was familiar with. This was because the profoundness here was much higher than the profoundness in the undying immortal world. Sect Master Yi, between this place and the Crying Ghost Ridge, which one is more terrifying? Luo Wuhan asked curiously. Yi Qinghan pondered for a moment and said in a low voice, "It should be both. The terror of the Crying Ghost Ridge comes from the strange magnetic field and spatial storm. The terror of this place comes from the immemorial beasts and some inexplicable sense of danger. For now, I can't tell which one is more terrifying. I'll have to go in first to know." Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The shroud was cold against the wind. Even if it was a golden immortal grade shroud, it didn't give him any sense of security. If he really triggered the ancient immortal rune, it would be fine if it was an ancient golden immortal grade one. If he was unlucky and encountered a primordial immortal emperor or primordial god shrine, he would be finished. Whoosh, bang. Yi Qinghan stepped forward slowly and looked around vigilantly. Some carnivorous plants were moving slowly. If one didn't pay attention, they wouldn't be able to tell that they were moving. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The ancient vines moved closer and closer to the group. However, as soon as they attacked, they were imprisoned in midair and couldn't move forward. Gu Jiutian's spiritual will was too terrifying. As long as it wasn't a first-stage immemorial golden immortal, she could completely control it. Once she broke through, her combat power would be even more terrifying. Chapter 2601. The powerful archaic plants had long been demonized, eating humans and meat. It was unknown how many vicious creatures had been devoured. As they devoured flesh, the demonized plants became more ferocious and even began to gain intelligence. They no longer simply devoured, they even began to absorb the essence of the sun and moon to cultivate. In the dense forest, no one knew which plants were demonized, but those who dared to underestimate this place, even a blade of grass could take away an expert. Even immortal golden immortals were no exception. Those who could discover this place and take away the map were definitely smart. They didn't go too deep and could escape with their lives. Yi Qinghan took one step at a time. The shroud emitted a horrifying aura, suppressing the demonized plants so much that they didn't dare to get close. Russell. The 7 of them walked forward slowly as if they were walking into an abyss. The narrow path should have been created by the trampling of beasts. Once they stepped out of this path, they could lose their lives anywhere. Supreme Ye's eyes flashed as he scanned the surroundings. He frowned. The laws of this place were much more powerful than the laws of the immortal world. He couldn't adapt to it in a short time, and his talent couldn't be used. That special sensing range was suppressed to 3 miles, and he couldn't sense anything further. This is really strange. This Supreme has always been successful. Am I going to die in this little ditch? Supreme Yi muttered to himself. He felt that he had entered the Ghost Cry Ridge again. Xiaoxing, do you feel anything special? Yi Qinghan asked. Bai Xiaoxing's skin was as white as jade, and her expression was normal. She didn't feel scared at all. Instead, she felt that there was a great fortune here. It was a soul connection, and there was a force guiding her. I don't feel any danger, but I feel a great fortune shrouding this place. Bai Xiaoxing said. There weren't many places with great fortune even in the primordial era. They were all occupied by primordial races or gods. Since Bai Xiaoxing could feel the great fortune here, it meant that this place was occupied by a powerful race during the primordial era. After walking through the dense forest, a barren land appeared in front of them after about 2 hours. The traces of the primordial battlefield had been eroded. If one didn't check carefully, they wouldn't be able to tell that a great battle had happened here. Whoosh. Yi Qinghan squatted down and used the heaven-suppressing long blade to scrape the ground. Some of the immemorial weapons had already completely corroded. No one had come here for countless years, so this place didn't suffer any external damage. More than half of the ancient buildings had collapsed, leaving only a few broken walls standing proudly like mountain rocks. However, the runes on them told the future generations that these were ancient city walls. After searching for an hour, he still hadn't found any clues about the previous owner of this place. The corpses of some supreme experts had long since been corroded into scraps, leaving no trace behind. They were buried in the yellow earth, and not even a tombstone was left behind. It was lamentable. Yi Qinghan looked up into the depths and said in a low voice, "Let's continue forward. Unless we find the corpses of the gods, we won't find any treasures." The others all agreed. This was only the periphery. The war would definitely not be fought in the city. The broken wall here should be the periphery. The 7 of them did not waste any time and quickened their pace. The eerie atmosphere made them even more cautious. Roar! A low, ear-splitting roar rang out, causing the 7 people's hair to stand on end. Even Luo Wuhan was exceptionally cautious. With a wave of his hand, he took out an immortal sword to protect himself. Shu. The sound of a giant beast stepping on the sand could be heard from far away. The roar of a beast that had never been heard before was definitely a beast passed down from the ancient times. It might even be an ancient creature. Buzz! The heaven-suppressing long blade shook. The blade light sparkled, and the laws of order fluctuated abnormally. Whoosh! Yi Qinghan crossed his legs and held the hilt of his blade with both hands. He stared into the depths and slowly moved forward. Huoling Tian was also exceptionally cautious. He took out his sky piercer to protect Supremacy Yi, who was on his shoulder. Gu Jiutian's eyes flashed. The awakening of his divine sense bloodline caused Yi Qinghan to tense up. However, he had no choice but to endure it. He kept reminding himself that Gu Jiutian was not an enemy. Luo Wuhan was stunned. He did not expect Gu Jiutian to have a divine bloodline. The pressure from the bloodline forced him to adjust his blood flow. Huoling Tian and Yan Yunbei, on the other hand, could not feel the pressure of the divine bloodline. This was because they did not have a primordial bloodline. They only had ordinary bodies. Their bloodline connection lacked a medium, so they could not feel the pressure of the divine bloodline. Supremacy Ye's hair stood on end. Even the immortal phoenix in the bracelet was awakened. She cried out in surprise, "Divine sense, divine sense, divine sense, bloodline inheritor, what a pure bloodline." The immortal phoenix was someone who had survived the primordial war. She might have lived even longer than the ancient heavenly emperor. How could she not know about the divine sense, divine sense? Gu Jiutian did not know that the awakening of his bloodline would cause Yi Qinghan to be so cautious. However, when he felt Yi Qinghan's emotional fluctuations, he could not help but recall the conversation he had with Yi Qinghan. He subconsciously restrained the surging blood flow of the divine sense. As expected, Yi Qinghan's aura had changed. Phew! Yi Qinghan exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. He no longer guarded against the rear. Instead, he focused on defending the front. Gu Jiutian's eyes flashed. He seemed to have guessed Yi Qinghan's identity. His fingertips trembled, but he did not move. Yi Qinghan and the others carried their immortal weapons for another 5 kilometers. Then, a huge door appeared in their line of sight. In the center of the huge door was a dark whirlpool. It was like a space-time door that led to a dark and desolate land. Gu Jiutian and Luo Wuhan were both people of high status, so the information they had access to was far more terrifying than Yi Qinghan and the others. When they saw the gate, they immediately knew what kind of power this place was in the primordial age. The Dark Divine General's residence. Gu Jiutian cried out. Just as everyone was shocked, a huge dragon head rushed out from the depths of the dark door. Its head was like a mountain, and its eyes were as huge as the sun. Its aura was terrifying. Roar! The dragon roared, causing sand and stones to fly everywhere. It pierced through space-time. Xiu xiu xiu. Bang bang bang. Yi Qinghan continuously waved his saber to shatter the sand and stones. His hand was numb, and he took a few steps back. He looked at the dragon cautiously. It was not that he had never seen a dragon before, but he had never seen such a terrifying dragon. Its head was even bigger than the dragons he had seen before. Hiss hiss hiss. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. If its head was 1,000 feet long, how long would its entire body be? However, this dragon seemed to be unable to leave the dark door. Just as its head exited the dark door, a divine power law pulled it back. The dragon's head flashed past as if it was an illusion. Oh my God! The Dark Divine General's mount, the Dark Dragon, is still alive. Gu Jiutian swallowed his saliva and screamed. Wah wah wah! The 7 people's blood flowed backward, and their bodies trembled. The dragon's aura was like the immortal emperor's. Even Gu Jiutian, who had the bloodline of an overgod, felt his hair stand on end. That was the suppression of strength. Yi Qinghan's hair stood on end. He held his saber tightly, and the divine light retracted. The Yen clan's blood boiled, and the human Dao Emperor pagoda on his forehead flashed. It was almost awakened by the dragon. Huff huff huff. Dong dong dong. The 7 people's heartbeats sped up, and they felt like their hearts were about to explode. The dark dragon charged again, and its head rushed out of the dark door again. However, it was quickly pulled back by a force. It could not leave the dark door at all. This is the Dark Divine General's dojo. There is a universe inside. Back then, the Dark Divine General and the Yen clan's elder fought, and both sides were heavily injured. The Dark Divine Land was knocked into the ancient immortal world, and no one knew where it went. So it ended up in the North Sea. Luo Wuhan wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Gu Jiutian's eyes narrowed, and he said in shock, "Even the Dark Dragon is not dead. Does that mean the Dark Divine General is still alive? This Dark Dragon is stronger than a person in the fourth form, right? Then the Dark Divine General's strength." Yi Qinghan had seen people in the fourth form before, and he had fought with them before. This Dark Dragon was stronger than Taijiang High Priest, but weaker than Ghost-Crying Ridge's Dharma King Samsara. Perhaps it could be compared to the owner. The immemorial Divine General was too terrifying. It was unimaginable how strong they were back then. The immemorial Immortal Emperor and immemorial Overgods were even more unimaginable. Wah wah wah. The shroud on Yi Qinghan's body was almost shattered by the force. If Hua Lingtian was not hiding behind Yi Qinghan, he would have been blown away. Chapter 2602. Whoosh! Yi Qinghan's feet were deeply embedded in the ground. The wind blew, and his black hair danced in the wind. With the Dark Dragon around, they couldn't enter the dojo of the Dark God General. Retreat. Let me see what's going on with the Dark Dragon. It shouldn't be alive. At least, it shouldn't be awake. Gu Jiutian frowned. According to the ancient records, the Divine General of Darkness and the two elders of the Yen clan had almost perished together. The Dark Dragon had also been severely injured and had almost died. Even if it had survived, it should have been suppressed at this time instead of trying to break through the door of darkness. Illusion. An illusion that was close to reality. As the successor of the Divine Will over God, the first thing that came to Gu Jiutian's mind was that the Dark God General had set up an illusion to guard the gate of darkness. If it really was an illusion, it would be able to launch a substantial attack. It could even cause Yi Qinghan's hand to go numb. Such an illusion was too terrifying. The person who set it up must have been an almighty who had reached the peak of perfection. Whoosh! Gu Jiutian used his divine will to close in on the gate of darkness. His aura shot up into the sky, and his divine aura crushed the surrounding laws. Open! Gu Jiutian pressed her jade-like hands on her forehead. Her divine will surged, and the blood of the Overgod exploded, shattering all illusions. If she could obtain the primordial divine will Overgod's divinity, her power would increase tremendously. Whoosh! The divine will hit the gate of darkness. But in an instant, the dark dragon soared into the sky, shattering everything. It directly crushed the divine will and sent Gu Jiutian flying back dozens of meters, blood spurting out of her mouth. Thud thud thud, Gu Jiutian retreated until she was beside Yi Qinghan. Her back was supported by Yi Qinghan, but the impact didn't weaken. Gu Jiutian had no choice but to wrap her arms around her waist. Whoosh! The long sword stabbed into the ground, and sparks flew. Gu Jiutian retreated another 20 meters before coming to a stop. This is indeed an illusion. It's definitely not the real Dark Dragon, Gu Jiutian said with certainty. If the illusory realm was already so powerful, how powerful would the real Dark Barbaric Dragon be? Unimaginable. It might even be stronger than the boss, or even the reincarnation Shakyamuni. I'm afraid that even if it's an illusion, we won't be able to break through it. Luo Wuhan stared at the gloomy door, his eyes filled with golden light. If he could break through the gloomy door and enter the gloomy Divine General's dojo, the treasures inside would be able to create a peerless divine land in just a few thousand years. If it's an illusion, how will we know if we don't try? However, Yi Qinghan refused to give up. The training hall was right in front of them, and an illusion was just an illusion. If the Dark Barbaric Dragon had really attacked, they would have died a long time ago. It only had an imposing aura, but it did not have any actual attack power. Let me try. The divine bird was eager to give it a try. This guy was an existence that could ignore any energy barrier. Its body was energy, so how could energy attack energy? Yi Qinghan's eyelids twitched. If the test failed, the divine bird would die without a doubt. I don't think it's a problem. Why bother? I still have Xianfeng to protect me, Supreme Yi patted his wristband and said firmly. Yi Qinghan pondered for a moment and said in a low voice, "Let's give it a try. Don't take the risk. If we can enter and break through the illusion from the inside, we can enter." The divine bird turned back into its human form. It held the wristband in its hand and slowly approached the gate of darkness. It did not activate the illusion to attack. Its little face was solemn. The Xianfeng in the wristband did not dare to awaken. Back then, the dark barbaric dragon's strength was close to that of a divine general. Even if it was an illusion, it would become stronger when facing a strong opponent. If it dared to awaken on its own, it would be equivalent to provoking it. The illusion would definitely attack the divine bird as well. Everyone watched as Supreme Yi approached the gate of darkness. A suffocating sense of nervousness shrouded their hearts, and their palms were covered in cold sweat. Supreme Yi's little hand slowly approached the whirlpool of the gate of darkness without any obstruction. The whirlpool sucked him in directly into the gate of darkness. A vast training hall appeared in front of them. The spiritual energy was oppressive and extremely rich. This was a perfect training hall of a holy land. Countless buildings stood proudly, covered in green vines. Only a few roofs were exposed, and the vicissitudes of life filled the air. Not far from the gate of darkness was a large array. The eye of the array was guarded by 18 stone statues in the shape of dragons, forming a natural array with the training hall. It was almost impossible to break through from the outside. Supreme Yi rubbed his hands and shouted excitedly, "Ah, I'm rich." Supreme Yi was not in a hurry to break the illusion array. Instead, he stared at the training hall inside. If he opened the illusion array barrier in advance, the treasures inside would not be his. They would have to be divided equally. "I'll go in and take a stroll first." Supreme Yi rushed into the depths of the training hall with a whoosh. Outside the gate of darkness, Yi Qinghan paced back and forth. He was extremely nervous. Although Supreme Yi's cultivation was not very high, he had grown up with him since he was young and had gone through countless calamities with him. It was not an exaggeration to treat him as his own son. This time, he was allowed to take the risk because of the immortal phoenix. Otherwise, he would not have agreed to let Supreme Yi enter. Time passed slowly. Everyone retreated far away, afraid that they would trigger another attack from the illusion array. Several hours later, Supreme Yi did not come out. Yi Qinghan continuously exhaled turbid air. He gripped the heaven-suppressing long saber tightly in his hand. If it were not for the fact that he was not strong enough, he would definitely not wait for Supreme Yi. Fortunately, Yi Qinghan did not know that Supreme Yi had gone in to search for the treasures himself. Otherwise, he would have been angered to death. Time passed slowly. The sky gradually darkened. Finally, there was some movement from the gate of darkness. The vortex began to reverse, and the gravel was swallowed. Yi Qinghan and the others retreated even further. Suddenly, there was a bright light. The illusion of the gate of darkness was broken down from the inside. An even more ancient door appeared in front of everyone. Supreme Yi was covered in dust. He stood in the center of the 18 stone statues of dragons as if he had gone through a lot of trouble. "Tui tui tui." Supreme Yi spat a few mouthfuls of saliva. His face was filled with a despicable smile as he said, "This formation core is really difficult to open. I spent a lot of effort to open it. Come in quickly." No one doubted Supreme Yi. However, Yi Qinghan looked at Supreme Yi's despicable appearance and felt that something was wrong. However, he did not point it out. He quickly stepped into the gate of darkness with the others. The vast gate of darkness was boundless. A tall mountain stretched for tens of thousands of miles. It was like a giant dragon that had yet to awaken. Countless ancient cities stood proudly. However, there was no one there. Thorns were everywhere, and there was not even a small path. It was obvious that no one had entered this place for many years. Majestic, vigorous, ancient, and ancient. This gate of darkness gave off an oppressive majesty. Even someone with a bloodline like Gu Jiutian felt some reverence. The primordial divine general of darkness was one of the strongest people below the primordial master gods and immortal emperors. He was on par with the divine general of Taijiang. He was the strongest person in the 5 elements master gods subsidiary gods. Yi Qinghan and the others swallowed a mouthful of saliva. If they could take over this gate of darkness, it would be the #1 force in the entire immortal world. It would be comparable to the 5 great immortal kingdoms. Even if a 4th form attacked together, they might not be able to break through. However, it was a pity that the gate of darkness was not something that anyone could conquer. Yi Qinghan could not, and neither could Luo Wuhan. Only Gu Jiutian had the most hope. I wonder if the divine general of darkness entered the gate of darkness. If he died, his godhead should be here. Luo Wuhan clenched his fists and said to Yi Qinghan and the others, "This map was brought by me. If we find the godhead of the divine general of darkness, this godhead will be mine. We will share the corresponding secret technique, and the other treasures and resources will belong to you. You don't have any objections, right?" No objections. As a person, we must know how to repay kindness. We cannot be calculative. Supreme Yi patted his chest and said firmly. Luo Wuhan's eyelids twitched. He asked in a muffled voice, "Did you come in here before? You dare to doubt me?" Supreme Yi was instantly enraged. It was as if he had been wronged. Yi Qinghan shook his head. He knew that Luo Wuhan was defeated again. Chapter 2603. Sovereign Ye's face was filled with dissatisfaction. He scolded angrily, "I'm speaking up for you. You provided the map and brought us here. Shouldn't you get better and more? Touch your conscience. How can you question me like this? Do you still have any morals?" Luo Wuhan was dumbfounded. He opened his mouth to refute, but there was nothing he could do. Yen Yunbei glanced at Sovereign Yi. He knew that there was a trap here, but there was no evidence. Moreover, there was no difference between the divine bird and Yi Qinghan. Bai Shaoxing covered his mouth and snickered. Gu Jiutian, on the other hand, was very calm. He looked at the serious supremacy Yi. She did not know him well and thought that he was sincere. "I feel that there is nothing wrong with what he said. If there is the dim darkness divine general's godhead and immortal weapon secret technique, they are all yours. As for the other treasures, we will let the fated ones get them." Gu Jiutian said calmly. Luo Wuhan didn't know what else to say. He could only speed up and walk deeper into the training ground. The dim darkness divine energy and immortal spiritual energy surged, forming waves that were almost tangible. The dim darkness law seemed to be fluctuating, but even the inheritor of the divine will master god, Gu Jiutian, couldn't comprehend it. At least not in a short period of time. As for Luo Wuhan and the others, they had no clue. As for Yi Qinghan, the bloodline power in his body was actively pushing the dim darkness divine energy outwards. This kind of power system was incompatible with the Yen clan's power system. They were like fire and water. Whoever gets the dim darkness divine general will be the next generation of dim darkness divine general. He will be able to suppress the current 4th form and even the current 5 immortal emperors. Luo Wuhan whispered excitedly. His goal was the dim darkness divine general's godhead, but he didn't expect it to be the dim darkness divine general's godhead. Yi Qinghan sighed inwardly. He would rather the primordial godhead disappear and the hatred between the Yen clan and these people disappear into the annals of history. However, some things would still appear when they should. The dim darkness divine general's godhead and the 6 master gods' godheads couldn't be crushed. There were a total of 16 godheads. Now, only the dim darkness divine general's godhead had appeared. As for the other master gods, not even their bloodline inheritors had appeared, let alone the dim darkness divine general's godhead. There was no one left in the Gloom Dao ground, only plants, thorns, and weeds. The Gloom Dao ground had broken away from the immortal world and fell here. The people back then were all killed by the shockwaves. Only a few powerful primordial beasts survived due to their thick skin and flesh. However, this was only limited to the outside of the Gloom Dao ground. The impact inside the Dao ground was the strongest. Everything inside had died. The 7 of them reactivated the illusionary realm and went deep inside. Stepping on the green grassland, it was exceptionally comfortable. The fragrance of the grass wafted into their noses and into their limbs. Sha sha sha. In the ancient gloomy divine palace, some green vines wrapped around it. When the wind blew, strange phenomena would appear. The divine palace was broken, but it still stood proudly. There were countless palaces surrounding the palace, where the followers or members of the gloomy dark race had cultivated in seclusion. The statue of the gloomy divine general was erected in the square outside the palace. The square was now occupied by weeds, and the flowers of the gloomy dark race swayed in the wind. It was a magnificent sight. This gloomy dark flower is the #1 poison in the immortal world. Don't be attracted by its beauty. Gu Jiutian reminded in a low voice. The #1 poison in the immortal world. It was definitely not a coincidence that it was called the #1 poison in the immortal world. This poisonous flower could block the worship of the death god and poison someone in the 4th form to death. This was not a legend, but a real record. Yi Qinghan looked at the gloomy dark flower in front of him. It was as dark as ink, and each flower was the size of a fist. There was a trace of blood-red stamen in the depths of the flower. From the outside, it did not look poisonous at all. A petal can poison a 1st-stage golden immortal to death. A stamen can poison a 4th form expert. I'm talking about the 4th form in the immortal world. Back then, the gloomy divine general personally poisoned an elder of the Yen tribe to death, which infuriated the Yen tribe. They sent out 2 elders and used the human Dao to lead 3,000 experts to flatten the gloomy divine general's territory. Even the gloom Dao ground was knocked out of the immortal world. Gu Jiutian's jade-like hand gently pinched and broke a gloomy dark flower. He sniffed at the tip of his nose and his body shook. The blood of the overgod in his body surged like a flood that was out of control. A stamen could poison a 4th form expert to death. Didn't this mean that this gloomy dark flower could poison a dozen 4th form experts to death? Yi Qinghan took a deep breath and asked hoarsely, "How can this stamen be made into poison?" If the gloomy divine general dies, no one will know this secret. Unless someone refines the gloomy divine general's godhood, Gu Jiutian said calmly. Luo Wuhan looked at the majestic gloomy divine palace and could not wait any longer. He took the lead and stepped towards the door of the gloomy divine palace. The door of the gloomy divine palace was still in a sealed state. It was as if a supreme was sleeping inside. Once it was disturbed, the world would be destroyed. Be careful. We don't know how many traps the gloomy divine general has set up here. If we're not careful, both of us will die, Gu Jiutian reminded in a low voice. Luo Wuhan nodded and looked at Yi Qinghan. He said, "Sect head Yi, just the 2 of us will go in. The others will guard outside first. How about that?" Yi Qinghan nodded and signaled for Sovereign Yi and the others to stay outside. He was also afraid that there would be many traps inside and unnecessary harm would be caused. Sovereign Yi shrugged. He did not mind. After all, he had already entered and did not activate any killing arrays. However, he did not obtain the gloomy divine general's godhood. He did not even pull out the sword in the gloomy divine general's chest. The sword's aura was too strong. It was even scarier than the heaven-suppressing saber. The door was pushed open. A surge of baleful aura rushed out of the palace and sent the 2 of them flying. A supreme sat on the dragon throne in the center of the palace. The divine general's battle robe was still emitting a divine light. There was a supreme battle sword in the left side of the divine priest's chest. His eyes were as bright as the stars and could steal one's soul. He gave off an unparalleled sense of oppression. This feeling was even scarier than when they met immortal Emperor Qing Zun. Sing sing sing. Bang. Yi Qinghan and Luo Wuhan flew backwards at the same time. They landed heavily on the plaza, causing the weeds to splatter everywhere. The 2 of them reacted quickly. They slammed their palms on the ground and quickly jumped up. Inside the palace, the gloomy law flowed and wailed. The gloomy divine power formed rays of golden light that lit up the gloomy divine hall. Gloomy divine general. Luo Wuhan and Gu Jiutian cried out in shock. They came with hope, but it was not very hopeful. Who would have thought that the gloomy divine general would really die? Even though he was an enemy, Yi Qinghan felt that this person was very domineering. Even if he died, he would still sit on the dragon throne in his palace. A true divine spirit was 2 meters tall when sitting. They were fundamentally different from humans. They were divine spirits, not humans. Those who were not of the same race had different intentions. No wonder the Yen race and the divine race had such a huge conflict. Now that I am dead, if the gloomy divine race opens the palace one day and obtains my godhood, I will show off my might and wipe out the Yen race. Boom. At this moment, the last bit of consciousness left in the gloomy divine general's body was activated by the divine power. A deep voice resounded throughout the palace, causing everyone's blood to boil. Kacha! Yi Qinghan held the heaven-suppressing long blade tightly and stared at the gloomy divine general's unwilling face. The Yen race's blood boiled and a desire appeared in their bones. They wanted to take away his godhood and make this inheritance disappear. Chapter 2604. Even if I die, if the dim darkness tribe opens the shrine one day and obtains my godhood, I will definitely destroy the Yen clan. What a fierce will. Even if he died, he would destroy the Yen clan. At this moment, Yi Qinghan's hatred for the dim darkness divine general came inexplicably. His eyes were bloodshot as he clenched his fists. The heaven-suppressing blade made a sound. Humans and immortals could not coexist. Humans were only from the Yen clan, but immortals represented the immemorial ancient immortal bloodline and the ancient god bloodline. Immortals wanted to kill humans, and humans wanted to kill immortals. In the primeval war, the gods and humans were at a disadvantage, and the humans were pushed to the lowest level of the planes, where they struggled at death's door. But now, in the higher planes, the bloodlines of the higher-level bloodlines had been married for countless years, and the bloodlines had been diluted generation after generation. Eventually, people like the deathless immortal world were born. They might be elites, but the purest bloodlines of the past were hidden in the shadows, and if they didn't have good fortune, they would never be able to achieve atavism. Today's scene made Yi Qinghan decide that the crazy sect must not refine the godhood, including the crazy sect. Otherwise, it would be hard to say if they would become enemies in the future. Yi Qinghan looked at Luo Wuhan's expectant eyes. He wanted to discuss whether he could give up the dim darkness divine general's godhood. However, from his eyes, he knew it was impossible. No one was willing to give up the immemorial divine general's godhood. This kind of godhood was too attractive. The godhood represented the pinnacle of a law. After refining it, one could reach the 4th stage of a big shot in a short time. Sigh, Yi Qinghan sighed in his heart. He was helpless. Hua! Luo Wuhan crawled up and quickly walked towards the shrine. He looked at the dim darkness divine general's corpse. Other than the divine general's battle robe being torn by the sword, there was no other damage. His body had not decayed, and his blood seemed to be surging. It was extremely terrifying. Junior Luo Wuhan greets Senior Divine General. Today, I am willing to accept your inheritance and take revenge for you. Luo Wuhan knelt on one knee and said respectfully, hoping to get the dim darkness divine general's approval. However, when he looked at the dim darkness divine general's right finger, he was stunned. Where is his divine ring? Luo Wuhan's pupils constricted as he turned to look at Sovereign Yi. Supremacy Yi had an innocent look on his face as he said angrily, "You're suspecting me? Do you still have a conscience? The two of you were blasted away when you came in. If I go in, won't I be blasted to smithereens? Besides, how do you know that the divine ring wasn't lost in the battle?" Luo Wuhan was speechless and didn't know how to refute. After all, there was no evidence. Tap tap tap, Yi Qinghan stepped into the divine hall. The shroud was swept up by the divine power in this place, and it fluttered loudly. His chi and blood seemed to be burning, and his black hair flew backward as his aura rose. Although the dimness god general was dead, it was as if he could feel Yi Qinghan's bloodline. His aura grew stronger. Yi Qinghan sheathed the heaven-suppressing blade on his back. He waved his hand and grabbed the primordial celestial sword in front of the underworld general's chest. He stepped on his chest. Bang! Yi Qinghan did not give the immemorial divine general any face. No matter how strong the enemy was, he was still an enemy. If they respected him, who would respect the dead Yen Emperor Crown Prince? Who would respect the countless dead Flame Clan humans? The Heaven's Sword of the Flame Clan. The Flame Clan had a total of 5 supreme swords: Heaven, Earth, Human, Emperor, and Monarch. The 5 swords represented the 5 elders of the Flame Clan. They controlled the 4 sides and the central region of the Flame Clan. These 5 swords not only represented one's identity, but they could also command the entire Flame Clan army. It was a pity that the Flame Clan had been destroyed. The sword light filled the sky. Together with the Flame Clan blood in Yi Qinghan's body, the sword energy shot into the clouds. Even at this moment, Yi Qinghan's aura reached its peak. He stood proudly in the divine hall, and his aura shook Gu Jiutin. His cold face made it seem like he had truly accepted the Flame Clan's inheritance and the Flame Clan's hatred. Young Master Luo, can you give me some face and give up on finding the location of the divine spark? Even if you find it, don't refine it. Yi Qinghan stood proudly with his sword in hand. His voice reverberated in the divine hall. Luo Wuhan was already in a bad mood because of the disappearance of the divine ring. After hearing Yi Qinghan's words, he immediately asked coldly, "Why? Do you know what the dim divine general's divine spark represents? It represents the arrival of an immortal emperor. But it also means that you will fight to the death with me." Yi Qinghan stared back at Luo Wuhan and said sternly, "This?" Luo Wuhan sucked in a breath of cold air and stared at Yi Qinghan. The current Yi Qinghan was no longer the same as before. He was now the heaven-suppressing Marquis, and his combat power was comparable to a first-degree realm cultivator. With the addition of the heaven-suppressing saber, he could even injure someone in his 4th form. "What do you mean?" Luo Wuhan frowned and asked. Among the 7 of them, Gu Jiutian had guessed Yi Qinghan's identity. The rest were from the insane sect, but this young master of the Luo clan was the only exception. Some things were better said in advance than later. It was better to suffer early than late. Although they were still friends now, if their relationship got better in the future and they fell out, it would be painful for everyone. "Because I am the inheritor of the Yan clan," Yi Qinghan said in a deep voice. Yan Yunbei and Hualing Tian didn't know what the Yan clan represented, but how could Gu Jiutian and Luo Wuhan not know this? Both of them sucked in a breath of cold air and trembled. Even though Gu Jiutian had guessed Yi Qinghan's identity, he couldn't hide his shock. Yi Qinghan stared at Luo Wuhan and said in a deep voice, "Once, I thought it was just a bloodline inheritance and hatred had nothing to do with me. But today, after seeing the dim divine spark's final will, I know that the divine spark and the special bloodline are the seeds of hatred. They will take root in anyone. I treat the martial arts record system as an ally and the Luo clan as a friend. I don't want to be enemies. If young Master Luo is willing to give up the divine spark for me, I can guarantee that whoever dares to attack the martial arts record system will be the same as attacking the insane sect." "What if I don't agree?" Luo Wuhan asked after a moment of silence. "Then we will be enemies. However, I won't kill you today, but you will have to stay in the dim divine sparring grounds for 30,000 years. Within 30,000 years, you are not allowed to leave the grounds." Yi Qinghan said in a deep voice, "The day you leave the grounds, we will be enemies. When we meet on the battlefield, there will be no mercy." Yi Qinghan's voice was like thunder, exploding in the shrine. Gu Jiutian and Luo Wuhan's hair stood on end. They had made it clear today, and now they had a choice. Yi Qinghan stared at the two from the corner of his eyes. He clenched the Yan clan's heaven sword tightly. He knew that he was being too soft-hearted, but he still didn't want to kill them today. Yi Qinghan knew Luo Wuhan and Gu Jiutian's choice because Xinyuan Qingyun's choice had increased his speed. It was almost impossible for a cultivator to give up on cultivation. When they meet on the battlefield in the future, it would be more than just pain. Sigh. A sigh filled with helplessness and sadness. "Why are you a member of the Yan clan?" Luo Wuhan laughed bitterly. Yi Qinghan looked up at the sky and sighed. He said in a hoarse voice, "I can't choose to inherit the soul. If I want to blame someone, I can only blame the live broadcast of the hunting game for awakening my Yan clan bloodline. I wonder if they will regret awakening my bloodline in the future? I choose to stay here for 30,000 years. Sect Master Yi, don't worry. I will not go out for 30,000 years. Also, take my handwritten letter. The martial arts record system will not make things difficult for the Kuang manor. Luo Wuhan said with certainty. Yi Qinghan's lips curled into a sad smile. He nodded and looked at Gu Jiutian. He said in a low voice, Your Highness Juden, you are my benefactor. You can stay or leave as you wish. I will not make things difficult for you. If you become a divine will master god and I become a member of the Yen clan, if we fight to the death, I will spare you 3 times. I will not regret it. Chapter 2605. Yi Qinghan was already speaking his mind. He didn't want to hide it anymore. If Gu Jiutian really wanted to spill the beans, he couldn't do anything about it. After all, if he left her here, the ancient heavenly emperor would find the crazed manor immediately. Sparing her 3 times could be considered repaying the debt of saving her life. 3 lives for 1. It was enough to repay the debt. Gu Jiutian originally thought that she could control the hatred, but after seeing the dim darkness divine general's final will, she understood that she was still too young. Only after seeing the immemorial divine general's will did she understand how deep the hatred was. Once the divine spark was refined, humans and gods couldn't coexist. Humans and gods couldn't coexist. One of them had to fall. This was the cruel reality. No one could defy the heavens. No, this was defying the will of the ancestors. Gu Jiutian looked at Yi Qinghan with a calm expression. She had already guessed Yi Qinghan's identity, just like the owner. However, the owner had many factors to consider. For example, the foundation of the Celestial Empire was in the hands of Yi Qinghan. She didn't dare to kill Yi Qinghan, at least not now. Sighed, Gu Jiutian sighed and said, Let's talk about it in the future. I feel that the hatred can be resolved. Yi Qinghan smiled. It was just a lie to say that the hatred could be resolved. Humans and gods couldn't coexist. This was the will of the ancestors. No one could change it unless they gave up their bloodline and the inheritance of the divine spark. Even then, the seed in their soul would slowly grow. This was an unresolvable result. Perhaps. Yi Qinghan said calmly. In the hall, there was silence for a moment. Luo Wuhan looked at the dim darkness divine general. The divine spark was still in his body. However, losing the divine ring couldn't change the result. You guys can leave. I will stay here for 30,000 years, or even 300,000 years. I won't come out until I refine the divine spark. Luo Wuhan said firmly. Yi Qinghan was silent for a moment. He still didn't choose to kill. Instead, he left with his sword. The moment he stepped out of the hall, he said calmly, Brother Yen, you will leave the martial arts record system from now on. Many thanks to young Master Luo for nurturing me all these years. If there is a battle to the death in the future, I will spare your life. However, you only have 1 chance. Yi Qinghan stepped out of the temple and waved his hand, sealing the door. The upper level of the gloomy shrine must have been plundered by sovereign Yi Qinghan. Yi Qinghan did not even need to think about it. Without any hesitation, he locked onto the door of the shrine and walked towards the back. This was not the only place where treasures were hidden in the dojo. The resources of the dim darkness lineage would not have been placed here. The Dao field was as large as the small world on the 3rd level of the mortal Dao Emperor Pagoda. It was dotted with stars and formed a system of its own. Apart from the gloomy flower, there were also many supreme divine treasures. Yi Qinghan waved his hand and snatched the gloom flower away. He then looked at everyone and said, Let's explore the other areas and take away all the godhoods we find. We won't cultivate them, but we can't let anyone else obtain them either. Yen Yunbei had no interest in the godhood, but Huoling Tian was reluctant to part with it. It would be a pity if he couldn't refine the godhood. At this moment, Sovereign Yi was a little worried. The blood of the divine phoenix flowed in his body, and it belonged to the same bloodline as the celestial phoenix. Back then, the phoenix must have belonged to the same camp. The celestial phoenix and the Yen clan were enemies, so the divine phoenix must have been enemies as well. Boss, what should we do? Since the hatred can't be erased in the future? Sovereign Yi asked secretly. Yi Qinghan was frowning. He wasn't worried about Luo Wuhan. After all, he could kill him after sparing him once. But what about the divine bird? Although it was a little despicable, it was still a spiritual pet that had followed him for countless years. He had long treated it as a brother. We'll talk about it later, Yi Qinghan said in a low voice. He led everyone deeper. There were many wild resources inside, but there weren't any powerful creatures. There weren't even any spiritual creatures. Bai Shaoxing, Yan Yunbei, and the others were in charge of collecting, while Yi Qinghan and Gu Jiutian were in charge of defense. They swept through the area and took away more than half of the resources in the Dao field. The ancient and majestic subsidiary shrines were swept away, and some of the stone tablets were taken away. Cultivation methods, divine arts, and great divine abilities. These things wouldn't trigger hatred. It depended on who used them. The people of the Guangfu Manor could forbid refining divine sparks, but they wouldn't forbid cultivating great divine abilities. For example, the inverse space galaxy diagram was the strongest secret technique to kill the Yen tribe in the hands of the owner. However, in Yi Qinghan's hands, it would definitely be the strongest defensive divine ability. The 6 of them searched the Dao field for more than 10 years. Finally, they found the resources of the Dark God General's bloodline in the last large warehouse. It could be described as an ocean. There were tens of thousands of divine rings and countless resources. Most of them were cultivation resources, supreme sacred treasures, and countless divine armors, sets, and divine weapons. After a rough calculation, they could equip about 10 million people. Yi Qinghan accepted all of them. In the end, there was no more space. Only then did Supremacy Yi take out a divine ring from his bosom. It was simple and dignified, with an oppressive aura. It emitted a dark divine power. Gu Jiutian recognized the origin of this divine ring at a glance. The Dark God Ring. It can store stars. You really stole it. Gu Jiutian said calmly. Sovereign Yi widened his eyes and said unhappily, "What do you mean by stealing? Don't think that you can speak irresponsibly just because you're beautiful. If I didn't come in first, would you be able to come in? Treasures belong to those who are fated. I am fated with this divine ring, so of course, it's mine." Gu Jiutian smiled and shrugged. "You're right. I've said the wrong thing. I've decided to forgive you. I accept your apology." Supreme martial artist Yi let out a sinister laugh. He dripped a drop of blood on the divine ring and claimed ownership of it. Then, he said sinisterly, "Boss, I originally wanted to leave the divine ring to you. However, your Yen clan's bloodline and divine power are incompatible with each other." Yi Qinghan pouted. This little guy would never let himself be taken advantage of. "These resources are for the Quang Manor's army. You can't take them for yourself. When we reach the heaven-suppressing prefecture, not only must you take the resources out, you must also take out the resources in the divine ring." Yi Qinghan said solemnly. Supreme Sovereign Yi grinned and patted his chest as he said, "This Supreme Sovereign is loyal and devoted. I will never be disloyal. Don't worry, boss." Yi Qinghan patted his head and said softly, "Keep them. Let's return to the North Divine Island." In less than half a day, the entire Divine Race's warehouse was taken away by Sovereign Yi and Yi Qinghan. As for Gu Jiutian, she was not interested in the resources at all. She did not want to raise an army. Her bloodline was a supreme army that represented countless gods. After the resources were taken away, the group rushed back to the Gate of Gloom. Then they realized that the stone carvings and arrays had changed. It was different from before. Everyone's hair stood on end. There are still living people in the Dark God General's dojo. Yi Qinghan looked around in shock. He held the Yen tribe's heaven sword tightly and was extremely cautious. Gu Jiutian was also in disbelief. She spread out her divine sense and searched the area. But to no avail. "Let's leave this place," Yi Qinghan said hurriedly. Yi Qinghan held by Xiaoxing's hand and rushed out without hesitation. Xiu. Yan Yunbei and Hualing Tian brought Sovereign Yi out as well. Gu Jiutian followed closely behind. Once they left the dojo, the creepy feeling enveloped them. Chapter 2606. As soon as the 6 of them left the training ground, A creepy feeling enveloped them. Roar! The illusion array was activated and the dark dragon rushed into the gate of darkness again, chasing after them. This time, it was right behind them. Whoosh! The 6 of them flew away and left the periphery. They wandered around the divine land outside the training ground. Most of the traces had been destroyed. Other than some powerful primordial beasts, there was nothing else. Yi Qinghan and Gu Jiutian were in charge of defense. They were very cautious, afraid of being attacked by the primordial beasts. Some primordial plants almost swept Huolingtian, by Shaoxing and the others away several times, but they were all repelled by Yi Qinghan and Gu Jiutian. The souls of these plants were hidden somewhere, so they couldn't be killed. Some of the plants were of a higher level than the star twining vine. Even if they were at the peak of the mystic immortal realm, the lethality of a vine was comparable to a high-level mystic immortal. It was hard to count how many vines there were. Yi Qinghan carried the saber on his back and held the Yen clan's heaven sword in his hand. With the support of his bloodline, the heaven sword's power was stronger than the heaven-suppressing saber. If he used his peak power, even if he lost to the heaven-suppressing saber with the power of an immortal emperor, he was still much stronger than before. Let's retreat. There are no more treasures inside. There's no need to continue fighting with these primordial plants, Yi Qinghan said in a low voice. I'll take the lead, you take the rear, Gu Jiutian said crisply. Yi Qinghan didn't retort. He gripped the heaven sword tightly and scanned his surroundings. Even the slightest movement could be controlled by him. He could always strike first to gain the initiative, forcing those strange ancient plants to retreat. Sha sha sha, a continuous sound came. Then, the forest fell into a dead silence. Even the primordial beasts stopped moving and went into hiding. Yi Qinghan, Gu Jiutian, and the others stared at their surroundings. Their breathing quickened as a wave of pressure enveloped them. The aura of death was approaching. Retreat! There's a super primordial creature in the forest. I'm afraid it's close to the 3rd or 4th stage. Yi Qinghan trembled and immediately said, Whoosh! Without hesitation, everyone fled towards the direction of the gate of darkness. The path ahead had been blocked off, and there were ancient creatures hiding inside. Their cultivation levels made Yi Qinghan feel powerless. In front of the gloomy gate, Yi Qinghan and company came to a halt. There were still living primordial experts inside the gate, and powerful primordial vicious beasts were chasing after them outside. There was no way out. Whoosh 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 dat sha sha sha. The sound of something tearing through the air kept coming from all directions. It was hard to imagine how big this ancient plant was. Gu Jiutian and the others turned pale. Only Yi Qinghan remained calm. Boom! It was as if the earth was quaking and the mountains were shaking. A towering plant appeared in front of them. Countless green vines wrapped around it, extending for thousands of miles and surrounding the gate of gloom. The trunk of the ancient plant was surrounded by countless green vines. It was as if the vines were surrounding the head. There was also a huge mouth, and there was a corpse hanging from the corner of the mouth. When the green vines closed, the corpse was covered. The corpse exuded powerful qi and blood. Even though it had been dead for countless years, it was still standing proudly. However, its throat was pierced by the green vines, and the qi and blood in its body were constantly being sucked away. Its life's achievements had become this ancient plant. Yi Qinghan's pupils shrank. When he saw the corpse, he felt the roar and anger in his bloodline. An elder of the Yen clan. The corpse was actually an elder of the Yen clan. Back then, there were a total of 5 grand elders and 31 ordinary elders. All of them were top existences and were the pillars of the Yen clan. Who would have thought that this elder would be corroded by a plant after his death? Whoosh! The human Tao Emperor Pagoda automatically appeared on his forehead, wanting to take back the elder's corpse. Buzz.hum. The sky sword in Yi Qinghan's hand whistled, as if it was roaring in anger. The sky sword actually had its own emotions. This elder of the Yen clan was the executor of the sky sword, which meant that he was one of the grand elders of the Yen clan. He had dedicated his life to the Yen clan and died a horrible death. A sense of humiliation shrouded Yi Qinghan's heart. This was the disgrace of a descendant. How could a descendant not be angry when their ancestor was being humiliated? Yi Qinghan's soul could not help but be angry. He pulled out his sword and walked towards the ancient plant. The sword pointed at the towering plant's trunk. It looked like an ant facing a god. Put down the elder's corpse. Yi Qinghan said coldly. Yen clan, you're actually from the Yen clan. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The ancient plant spoke human language, but it was the ancient god language. It was incomparably majestic and mighty. Whoosh! Yi Qinghan waved his hand and tore off the burial cloth. The blood of the Yen clan surged, and his battle-intent soared. It was as if the Yen emperor was alive. The sky sword of the Yen clan soared into the sky and confronted the ancient plant. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The wind was raging. Yi Qinghan's human Tao energy formed a battle robe that fluttered in the wind. His aura was like a rainbow. Even the ancient emperors were nothing compared to him. Descendant of the Yen emperor, Yi Qinghan. I'll give you one more chance. Put down the corpse and scram. Yi Qinghan's angry voice was deafening. His killing aura tore through the river. It was as if an ancient god had descended and all living things were ants. Yen Emperor. Descendant of the Yen Emperor. In the battle that year, the Yen Emperor was on par with the ancient immortal emperors. Even after the Yen ancestor died, he fought until the end. Until his death, he stood proudly in the world for countless years. The flag of the Yen clan never fell. That was a legend. Now, Yi Qinghan took over the flag and fought until his death. It's a pity. You're not the Yen Emperor. I can borrow your corpse's blood to transform. The essence of this corpse is already gone. It's useless. I'll give it to you. Boom. Whoosh. The ancient plant threw the corpse away. The ancient corpse flew in the wind. Its white hair danced in the wind and the skin on its face was like the bark of an old tree. Whoosh. Following that, dozens of green vines soared through the air and attacked Yi Qinghan. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Yi Qinghan went against the flow of the stars. His speed was extremely fast. He directly intercepted the corpse of the Yen clan's elder. He flipped his body and threw the corpse to Yen Yunbei. Take the corpse and retreat to the door of darkness. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Yi Qinghan's sword moved in all directions. It was extremely sharp. The sword light shattered 100 li and continuously cut the green vines. The sharp sword chi was actually unable to destroy the vitality of the green vines. Whoosh. Yen Yunbei handed the corpse to Hua Lingtian. He held a short sword in his hand and moved around the green vines. He wanted to get closer to the main body of the ancient plant. At this moment, Gu Jiutian's master god bloodline was stimulated by Yi Qinghan's Yen clan bloodline. His hostility rose. His fingertips trembled and sweat dripped down his forehead. Buzz. His divine consciousness shook the void and distorted time and space. However, Yi Qinghan couldn't care less. His sword moved in the void and his feet stepped on the void. He constantly danced within the green vines and quickly approached the main body. The power of human Tao seemed to have the advantage of restraining ancient creatures. This ancient green vine was already close to the third stage. It kept attacking Yi Qinghan and Yen Yunbei. Hua Lingtian wanted to join the battle, but he was stopped by Supreme Yi. Don't go up and die. It's not that both of them have the combat strength of a big shot, and the weapons in their hands are also high-grade ancient immortal swords. You'll die in minutes if you go up, Supreme Yi said sternly. At this moment, Gu Jiutian stared at the ancient green vine and said coldly, the three of you stay here and don't move. Gu Jiutian suppressed his hatred and flew away. His divine consciousness erupted, and the void froze. It was as if the area within 100 li had fallen into the domain of a master god. Even the ancient green vine had lost its ability to move. The bloodline of a master god and the Yen clan were stimulated. Their auras were monstrous, and their hostility was thick. Master god bloodline? Shouldn't you be enemies? Why are you helping him? The ancient green vine struggled, wanting to shatter the divine consciousness domain. However, due to the suppression of its bloodline, it could not open its eyes in just a few breaths. Yi Qinghan became one with his sword and stabbed the ancient green vine's main trunk. Boom boom boom. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Bang. Dozens of green vines tightly sealed the main trunk, wanting to resist Yi Qinghan's peak attack. Whoosh. Poochie. The Yen clan's heavenly sword seemed to have pierced into flesh. The ancient green vine roared, and billions of green vines trembled. Its anger and pain allowed it to break free from the divine consciousness domain. Countless green vines returned and wrapped Yi Qinghan tightly. Chapter 2607. Whoosh! Countless green vines pierced through the air and pierced towards Yi Qinghan, leaving no space for him to escape. Whoosh whoosh! Yen Yunbei continuously flipped in the air. Using the green vines, he circled to the back of the green vines and pulled a green vine towards the immemorial azure vine's trunk. Poochie! The immemorial celestial sword pierced into the trunk with a sharp sword chi. The tender green juice was mixed with blood, which was extremely disgusting. Roar! The immemorial azure vine roared angrily. Countless green vines changed their attacking direction and surrounded Yen Yunbei. They wanted to kill Yi Qinghan and him at the same time. Whoosh! Yen Yunbei rapidly descended. The short sword in his hand tore through the trunk and pulled it all the way to the bottom. His body was dyed red by the green juice. In front of him, Yi Qinghan pierced through the trunk with his sword. In an instant, the sky turned dark, and it was extremely difficult to escape. Reverse the Milky Way, rise and fall. Whoosh! Thousands of stars flashed in the sky and the Milky Way surged. The starlight gathered into a beam of divine light that penetrated through the countless green vines and entered Yi Qinghan's body, causing his power to rise instantly. Boom! That the Yen clan's heaven sword exploded with a monstrous force and tore through the trunk. Its body drilled into the trunk directly. Whoosh! Yi Qinghan stomped his legs and soared into the sky, causing the interior of the trunk to become empty. Whoosh! Yen Yunbei and Yi Qinghan attacked from the inside. Yen Yunbei's damage was considered small, but Yi Qinghan's damage was too great. Bang bang bang! Thousands of green vines attacked together and sent Yi Qinghan flying out of the battlefield. Countless green vines pierced through the trunk, wanting to force Yi Qinghan out of his body. Whoosh whoosh whoosh! Yi Qinghan turned into a sharp arrow and shot through the clouds. He rushed out of the trunk of the immemorial azure vine. Before he could escape, a green vine pierced through his calf. Yi Qinghan let out a shrill roar as he swung his sword to cut off the green vines. Unfortunately, he was still a step too late. Following that, hundreds of green vines wrapped around his limbs and waist, tightening tightly as if they were about to crush his body. Hum! The human Tao Imperial Pagoda appeared on his forehead and emitted a weak ray of light. It supported Yi Qinghan's defense and forcefully stopped the attack of the immemorial green vine. Yi Qinghan's eyes shone brightly. His Yen clan bloodline was completely awakened. His aura soared to the heavens. His mind controlled the heaven-suppressing long blade on his back and the chaotic 7 feet berserk in his body. At the same time, they left his body and attacked the green vines. Whoosh whoosh whoosh! The boundless divine radiance illuminated the starry sky. Outside the gate of darkness, it was as bright as day. The trillions of stars became even brighter. Whoosh whoosh whoosh! Whoosh whoosh whoosh! Violent winds whistled as waves surged into the sky. Countless green vines had gained the upper hand, and they coiled towards Yi Qinghan from all directions. Every single vine carried a fierce killing intent. If it wasn't for the protection of the mortal Tao Emperor Pagoda, any one of the vines would have been able to pierce through his defenses. Swoosh swoosh swoosh! The heaven-suppressing wild blade and the chaotic 7 feet berserk continuously cut down the oncoming green vines. However, they couldn't break free from the vines with their physical bodies. Yi Qinghan's veins bulged. His left hand grabbed a vine on his right hand. His overflowing divine power actually tore the vine apart. The sword in his right hand was finally able to unleash its power. He continuously cut down the vines around his waist. The vines fell to the ground. Another green vine pierced through the air and pierced towards his back like an ancient spear. Although it didn't break through the human Tao Emperor Pagoda's defenses, The impact almost caused his internal organs to shift. He spat out a mouthful of blood that dyed the immemorial green vine red. Buzz! The two long blades were controlled by his mind. They guarded his chest and continuously cut down the oncoming green vines. Dozens of Yen clan divine arts split into hundreds of figures that attacked the immemorial green vine from all directions. They wanted to find the location of the green vine's soul. The immemorial green vine was furious. It didn't expect to be injured by Yi Qinghan. Although its realm was high, it hadn't transformed yet. It didn't have a systematic attack method and purely relied on its instincts. Its combat power was slightly weak. However, once it successfully transformed, its combat power would definitely surpass the third realm. Unfortunately, it wasn't in the third realm and could only be compared to an ordinary second realm expert. Although Yi Qinghan and Yen Yunbei were beaten up badly, it wasn't enough to kill them. Swoosh! Swoosh! Yi Qinghan's heaven sword trembled. The sword light swept through the air and tore apart dozens of green vines. He attacked the main body again. Yen Yunbei's body was pierced in several places. The wounds were shocking. However, at this moment he was cooperating with Yi Qinghan. One attacked from the front and the other from the back. Their cooperation was perfect. At this moment, Gu Jiutian couldn't help anymore. The hostility in her bloodline was too strong. Once she joined the battle, there was a high possibility that she would clash with Yi Qinghan. Gu Jiutian stood far away. She formed a seal with her palms and activated her Master God bloodline. Her divine sense covered the immemorial green vine. Her voice was like the sound of nature as she shouted angrily, "Demon! You still refuse to submit after seeing my Master God bloodline." Whoosh! The Master God's aura was vast and mighty. It suppressed all the primordial monsters and made them submit. However, the immemorial green vine was too ferocious. After absorbing the essence of the Yen clan's elder for countless years, it had completely turned into a demon. It didn't believe in gods and didn't respect the common people. It had become an independent demon. Ha, Master God bloodline. Don't worry, you can't run away. As long as I devour your essence, I can merge the Master God bloodline and the Yen clan's orthodox bloodline. I can then become a supreme demon god and command billions of demons. Who cares about the gods? Who cares about the Yen clan? Who cares about the ancient immortal clan? They will all submit to me. The immemorial green vine roared. Countless green vines tore apart the void. Its aura was even stronger. It wanted to crush Yi Qinghan as soon as possible. Whoosh, whoosh. The 10,000-meter-long sword rainbow descended from the sky, destroying everything in its path. It sliced through hundreds of vines, bypassing the defenses of the immemorial azure vines, and continued its assault on the main trunk. The soul was inside the main trunk. Unfortunately, the main trunk was too thick, and Yi Qinghan had only managed to destroy 1% of it. The immemorial green vine opened its bloody mouth. It was like a black hole that could swallow a mountain. Its suction force was extremely strong. The human Tao Emperor pagoda on Yi Qinghan's forehead suddenly bloomed. It awakened on its own and expanded infinitely, blocking in front of Yi Qinghan. Boom! The door to the fourth level of the human Tao Emperor pagoda expanded infinitely. It was like a universe. Divine light shot out in all directions, forming an even bigger black hole vortex. Boom! Boom! Whoosh! The immemorial green vine was shocked. Its roots dug into the ground, but it still couldn't stabilize itself. The ground was uprooted, and countless green vines were pulled into the fourth level of the human Tao Emperor pagoda. Whoosh! Yi Qinghan leaped into the air and descended from the sky. He attacked from above with the heaven sword in his hand. He turned into a meteor and drew a bolt of lightning and flames in the void. The flames shattered the void, and even the air was burned. Yen Yunbei attacked from below, continuously cutting off the roots. The short sword in his hand was even more agile than a dragon. More than 10 thick roots were cut off. The immemorial green vine was continuously attacked. It couldn't resist the suction force of the human Tao Emperor pagoda and was pulled into the fourth level. The remaining vines on the outside made a dying attack. They instantly pierced through Yi Qinghan and Yen Yunbei's chests, almost hitting their hearts. Whoosh, bang, boom. Yi Qinghan and Yan Yunbei were sent flying hundreds of meters away. They were smashed deep into the ground. There were large amounts of corpses and baleful aura. The two of them were almost buried alive. Chapter 2608. Countless corpses were hidden under the ground of the gloomy divine land. Some belonged to the Yen tribe, while others belonged to the gloomy divine tribe. The corpses were rotten, and the flesh and blood clashed with each other, forming a murderous aura. Once it entered one's body, it was difficult to get rid of it. Yi Qinghan and Yan Yunbei were quick to react. Once the murderous aura entered their bodies, they instantly slammed their palms deep into the ground, shooting up into the sky. The human Tao Emperor Pagoda followed closely behind, entering Yi Qinghan's consciousness. Whoosh! Two murderous auras enveloped the two of them, almost destroying their souls. Whoosh! At this moment, Gu Jiutian rushed towards Yan Yunbei. His divine sense covered his body, removing all the murderous aura on the surface of his body. With a push of his jade-like hand, he removed all the murderous aura from his body. Boom! Yan Yunbei's face was pale. When his feet landed on the ground, he felt his legs were light. He knelt down on one knee, stabbing the dagger in his hand into the ground. His eyes flashed with shock, and even his breath was heavy. He was only one step away from death. Luckily, Gu Jiutian was one step ahead. However, Yi Qinghan was much better. With the human Tao Emperor Pagoda protecting him, the murderous aura was swept away as soon as it entered his body. His foundation was not damaged, but he was still in a sorry state. Phew, Yi Qinghan exhaled, his face pale. If not for the human Tao Emperor Pagoda protecting him, he would have died for sure. Even if he used the power of an immortal emperor, he might not have survived. Outside the gloomy door, it was a mess. The primordial forest outside the divine land was dead silent. It was as if the primordial demonic vine was the strongest creature. Once it was defeated, the other creatures did not dare to provoke Yi Qinghan and the others. I didn't expect you to have the human Tao Emperor Pagoda and have comprehended the first 3 stages of the human Tao. I thought it was completely lost. Gu Jiutian stared at Yi Qinghan. As time passed, Yi Qinghan would reveal more and more things. There might be a huge conflict between the two. Yi Qinghan gritted his teeth. He really did not want to be Gu Jiutian's enemy, but there was nothing he could do. He could only sigh and nod. I had no choice. Gu Jiutian pondered for a long time. He looked at Yi Qinghan and said calmly, "There is a way to get rid of the hatred in the bloodline. The chances are slim, but we can try." Yi Qinghan's eyes lit up and he pounced on Gu Jiutian. He grabbed Gu Jiutian's hands and asked hurriedly, "How do we remove it? I don't want this hatred between humans and gods to continue to be passed down. There's no need for that. I feel that in such a big world, why can't we coexist?" Gu Jiutian's fingertips moved slightly as he broke free from Yi Qinghan's large hand. His expression was normal as he turned his back to Yi Qinghan and said faintly, "There are 2 solutions. The first is to cultivate to a cultivation level that surpasses the distant ancestors and completely erase the seed of hatred. The second solution." "What's the second solution?" Yi Qinghan immediately asked. However, Gu Jiutian seemed unwilling to say. After a moment of silence, Gu Jiutian said calmly, "Let's talk about this in the future. When we really have to fight, I will tell you." Yi Qinghan scratched his head. However, he could not force him. He could only give up. "Let's go back. We can't stay here for too long. The illusion array has been activated again. There must be something inside that has been rearranged. However, the power is much weaker and the perception is much weaker. Perhaps the cultivation level of the person who set up the illusion array is much weaker than the dim divine general. However, he is still much, much stronger than us." Gu Jiutian turned to look at the dark whirlpool at the gate. His body trembled as he took the initiative to walk towards the ancient forest. Yi Qinghan looked at the dumbfounded by Shaoxing and Hualing Tian. Then he looked at the excited supreme martial artist Yi. He sighed and shook his head. Then he said, "Let's go. We'll talk after we leave this place." "Hua hua hua." Everyone did not say much. This time, they had received too much news. They could also see that Yi Qinghan was carrying more things on his shoulders. They were all unhappy. Yi Qinghan knew his own heart the best. He did not want to carry this burden. He did not even want to take revenge. He did not want to inherit the hatred and fight against the ancient immortals and ancient gods. If he could resolve this hatred, it would naturally be the best situation for him. Seeing everyone leave, Yi Qinghan looked at the corpse of the Yen clan elder lying on the ground. It was only in the shape of a human and was as dry as a tree branch. Sadness filled his heart. Hua! Yi Qinghan carried the elder on his back and walked towards the ancient forest. This time, no ancient immortal monsters dared to ambush them. They all retreated far away. Soon they reached the shore. Everyone rose into the air and rode the waves. Soon, the 6 of them disappeared into the foggy sea. The gate of darkness was extremely quiet. The deep whirlpool seemed to lead to the depths of the universe. Stars dotted the area and the illusion of the dark dragon did not appear. Once they entered the gate of darkness, the 18 dark dragon statues slowly moved and repaired themselves. The power of the illusion formation also slowly increased. Hua! In the depths of the mountain range, there seemed to be a tremor. No. It wasn't shaking but twisting. It wasn't a mountain at all, but a giant dragon. The Dark God General's mount, the Dark Dragon. The Dark Mang Dragon was incomparably huge, stretching for thousands of miles. This was an immemorial creature, a creature on the same level as the immemorial dragon. Its gigantic head was like a mountain peak. With a twist of its body, the 18 dragon statues outside the eye of the illusion formation quickly moved and returned to their positions. The Dark God General was dead but his mount was still alive. However, it was heavily injured and could not recover. The illusion formation did not move because of people but because of the Dark Dragon. Yi Qinghan suspected that they had gone in the wrong direction. Maybe because they had escaped early, they had escaped. Een! Roar! The Dark Demon Dragon was recovering quickly. It seemed that it had been awakened because of the destruction of the illusion formation. Once it woke up, it could not wait to use the Dark God power in the Dark God General's dojo to recover. Within the Dark God Palace, Luo Wuhan was awakened. He held onto the Dark God General's godhood and stepped out of the door. When he saw the moving mountain range outside, he could not help but explode. The Dark Dragon actually did not die. Gulp, hiss hiss hiss. Luo Wuhan retreated back into the palace and immediately sealed it. He rushed towards the upper part of the palace and did not dare to stay in the palace for long. Huadin! The mountain range flew into the sky and the Dark Dragon transformed into a giant that was 30 feet tall. It was completely black and gave off a huge amount of Dark God power. However, its body was lifeless and looked like it was about to die. The wounds on its body were shocking. The sword wounds had almost pierced through its body. Its eyes were as black as ink and the baleful god power seemed to be even denser than the baleful god power underground. Hong! The Dark Dragon transformed into a giant and landed on the ground. It walked towards the palace with difficulty. It pushed open the door and looked at the Dark God General. The Dark God General was gone. The Dark God General was gone. The Dark God General's sword was gone. Bang! The Dark Dragon knelt on the ground and the palace shook slightly. Great Master! Back then, you said that whoever inherited your godhood would be the 2nd generation Divine General. I will be loyal to you. Great Master, please rest in peace. Luo Wuhan, who was on the rooftop, had goosebumps all over his body. He didn't dare to breathe at all. Although the Dark Barbaric Dragon had said so, he hadn't refined the Dark Divine General's godhead. Therefore, he wasn't considered a 2nd generation Divine General. How could the Dark Barbaric Dragon spare him? Chapter 2609. Yi Qinghan didn't care about what was happening inside the Door of Gloom because he and Gu Jiutian had already rushed into the vast ocean. The vast northern borderline was filled with water and mist. It wasn't suitable for sailing in the early morning, so the 6 of them held hands and went with the flow, waiting for the sun to shine and blow away the mist. Boom! Huge waves rolled, but for 10 days the mist couldn't be blown away, and they couldn't fly out of the misty area. The North Sea is now in the misty period. It'll probably take a month for it to return to normal. Gu Jiutian was experienced and knowledgeable. There's no danger in the misty period. We'll just lose our way. Yi Qinghan's eyes flashed. He activated the Milky Way, but he still couldn't see the stars. He could only contact the giant star of Ravenous Wolf. A star shone brightly and tore through the mist. The giant star of Ravenous Wolf is located in the southeast. If we follow the giant star of Ravenous Wolf, we can reach the northern God state. If we turn 30 degrees to the northwest, we can reach the northern God Island, Gu Jiutian said confidently as he looked up at the giant star of Ravenous Wolf. Gu Jiutian was a native of the immortal world and had the bloodline of an overgod. He knew more about the immortal world than Yi Qinghan. Even in the vast ocean, he could quickly find the direction with just one coordinate. After getting the correct direction, Yi Qinghan didn't hesitate and rushed 30 degrees northwest of the giant star of Ravenous Wolf. Bush. Everyone sped up and moved against the wind. However, as time passed, the wind blew faster and faster. It was as if the entire North Sea was being lifted. Yi Qinghan and Gu Jiutian's eyelids twitched. They looked at each other and seemed to have noticed something unusual. Gu Jiutian's eyes flashed as he reminded them in a low voice. Something strange must have happened during the cloud fog period. Be careful, everyone. Hum. The Yen clan's heaven sword vibrated, and sword energy shot up into the sky. Even though Yi Qinghan was wrapped in the shroud, he could still feel the surging divine power. It wasn't just one type of divine power, but dozens or even hundreds of types. Gu Jiutian took a deep breath. His pupils constricted as he asked in a low voice, "What happened? Why are there so many strands of divine power intertwined?" Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The impact of the huge waves almost knocked everyone into the sea. Boom boom boom. Whoosh. The energy ripples in front of him were too strange. The divine power was mixed with a monstrous baleful aura. The aura of death was exceptionally dense. Everyone soared into the sky and looked down at the sea in front of them. A moving island appeared in front of them, and it was many times larger than the northern divine island. Whoosh! The moving island range stretched out endlessly, surging in the sea and rushing into the depths. It was impossible for human strength to stop it. The fallen land of gods. It's the second ancient battlefield, but it's moving. Everyone looked at the moving island. The banners fluttered in the wind, and corpses were strewn all over the place. Countless experts of the Yen clan were nailed to the ground, and the island was dyed red. Rumbling rhythms rumbled from the interior of the island. It was as if armored horses were galloping and war songs were roaring. The vicissitudes of life soared into the sky, singing the majesty of the ancient battle. I'll go down and take a look. You guys stay in the air. Whoosh! Yi Qinghan rushed toward the island. The moment he entered, baleful aura rushed toward the shroud, and his black hair danced wildly. The corpses of the Yen clan's martyrs were intertwined with each other. They had died a tragic death. Some of them looked very young and some of them were very old. The ancient war looked a little ridiculous at this moment. Why can't humans and gods coexist? Yi Qinghan wanted to ask these people who had died. Was it for resources? For glory? Could humans of the Yen clan not become experts? Were they destined to be enslaved? The Yen clan will never be enslaved. Gods, ancient immortals, if you want to fight, I'll trample you under my feet sooner or later. Yi Qinghan was furious. Looking at the situation here, the Yen clan had many old, weak, and sick people, while the primordial gods were all elites. It was clear that this was the Yen clan's territory. The Yen clan had been passively defending, but they had been completely wiped out. Whoosh! Yi Qinghan stepped on the corpses of the gods and walked toward the depths. Many Yen clan elders were still holding infants in their arms. Their corpses had been pierced through and were still wrapped in baleful aura. They hadn't decomposed and had long been petrified. Yi Qinghan didn't dare to act recklessly. Many places had primordial god killing patterns that could be triggered easily. Whoosh! Yi Qinghan bent down and moved the corpses together. He also placed the Yen clan elders' corpses together. These corpses had lost their divine aura and could be stored in Supreme Saint Ye's divine ring. Some of the Yen clan corpses had already severely decomposed and would shatter at the slightest touch. Yi Qinghan carefully moved all the corpses together. This huge island had taken him several months, but he didn't think it was a waste of time. No matter what, he was the Yen Emperor's descendant. The Yen Emperor's blood flowed in his veins. An old man sat cross-legged under the Yen clan's war banner. The war banner in his hand was inserted deep into the ground, and there were several divine spears piercing through his body. He looked at the sky before he died with a heart full of unwillingness. The old man's Yen clan battle robe was almost empty. Yi Qinghan was about to carry him when a piece of parchment fell from his chest. On it was written, "My children and grandchildren have all died in battle. I don't want to live in disgrace. Today's battle is to meet death." Whoosh! Yi Qinghan's tears immediately gushed out. How cruel was this? His children and grandchildren had all died, and he was an old steed in the stable. He could only take revenge by fighting to the death. He didn't want to be a hero. He only wanted to take revenge for his children and grandchildren. Boom! Yi Qinghan knelt in front of the old man and held the parchment tightly. He hugged the old man's corpse and was extremely resentful. "Your Highness Judian, may I ask why the war broke out back then? Is the fault of my Yen clan or your God clan?" Yi Qinghan didn't turn his head and roared angrily. The Yen clan is the orthodox human race and was originally enslaved. However, the ancient Yen clan developed rapidly and surpassed the ancient gods and ancient immortals. Their status changed. Both sides no longer accepted the status of being enslaved and enslaved. The fuse of the war was because the ancient Jiang God clan invaded the Yen clan's habitat and enslaved 300,000 experts. The old, the weak, the sick, and the disabled were all slaughtered. This caused the Yen Emperor's crown prince to lead an all-out counterattack. Gu Jiutian replied softly. "So the fault is not with the Yen clan?" Yi Qinghan roared. Gu Jiutian nodded and replied hoarsely, "That's why I don't want to inherit this hatred." Right and wrong had long been decided. However, the ancient gods and ancient immortals, as well as those with special bloodlines, were high and mighty. They naturally thought that the human race should be enslaved. Who would have thought that the Yen clan would rise again after 30 years? This hatred should disappear. Time has passed and the ancient god clan is almost extinct. The ancient immortals have also been wiped out. Now, the bloodlines of the ancient gods and ancient immortals are not pure Yen clan or ancient gods and ancient immortals. Why hold on to the hatred of the past? Gu Jiutian whispered. "Your Highness, you don't mind if I take away all the godhoods here and cut off the inheritance, right?" Yi Qinghan slowly stood up and looked around. There were at least 1,000 god corpses and thousands of ancient immortal corpses here. If this inheritance leaked out, it would be a devastating disaster for the Yen clan. Chapter 2610. Yi Qinghan's words sounded like a question, but in fact, he had already made a decision. Even if Gu Jiutian objected, he would still do it. Gu Jiutian stood in the slowly descending divine land, a hint of helplessness in his beautiful face. He reminded, whether it's the ancient gods, ancient immortals, or the 10 ancient special bloodlines, they all inherit from the heavens. Breaking their inheritance is like breaking the heavens' child. You can't bear this heavenly punishment. What about the Yen clan? They have a mother but no father to love them? Yi Qinghan frowned and asked. Gu Jiutian pursed his lips. The Yen clan is very special. They created another path and inherited it from themselves. In my opinion, if they exist, then they exist. Forcefully erasing them is also against the heavens. Therefore, the ancient gods, ancient immortals, and the special bloodlines of the ancient races have all been punished by the heavens. Now, the ancient immortal world has been torn apart. 80 to 90% of the great inheritances have been broken, and all the primordial godhoods have been lost. If you don't want to go against the heavens, the one who will be implicated is the Kuang sect. You won't have a good ending. Yi Qinghan licked the tip of his tongue and snorted in his heart. The heavenly punishment had been with him since he was young. The so-called heavenly punishment was just karma. Since it was retribution, it should be retribution on the so-called ancient immortals. At worst, he would just leave the Kuang sect. Divine bird, put all the corpses in the divine ring. Don't let anyone refine the godhoods, Yi Qinghan said firmly. Supreme Yi was wild with joy. He flew over and said solemnly, "Okay, no one will be able to use the godhoods." Yi Qinghan stared at Supreme Yi and warned in a low voice, "Don't refine the godhoods on your own unless you want to be my enemy." Supreme Yi patted his chest and said, "I swear on my conscience that I won't refine the godhoods." Phew! Yi Qinghan exhaled and looked at the corpses on the ground. He buried the bodies of the Yen clan on the spot. After all, this was the ancestral land of the Yen clan. Even if it drifted with the waves, they were still buried in the land that accompanied them. Yi Qinghan alone kowtowed 9 times as a farewell to his ancestor. "One day, I will bury you in the territory of the flame race so that you will never drift again," Yi Qinghan thought to himself. At this moment, Supreme Yi was constantly collecting god corpses. He felt even more excited than collecting primordial immortal treasures. Yi Qinghan grew uneasy when he saw the look on Yunche's face. He muttered to himself, "This guy is far too unreliable. Once we reach the northern divine island, he'll bury all of the divine corpses there." Yen Yunbei and the others also landed on the drifting divine land. They searched in silence, hoping to get some divine treasures from the depths. Even if they couldn't refine the godheads, they could at least get some divine weapons. There shouldn't be any problem with immemorial divine abilities. Some places might have primordial divine rune-killing formations, but some places obviously didn't. The group gradually ran into the depths of the Yen tribe's territory. Many primordial divine runes had already lost their effects, and some ancient buildings had collapsed. Even Yi Qinghan didn't bother to search inside. Bai Xiaoxing's white robes fluttered in the wind as he silently walked on the ancient path. Rubble was everywhere. The broken halberd sinks into sand had yet to be sold. Some broken weapons still had traces of the Yen tribe. They walked on the battlefield in low spirits. Since ancient times, war had always been cruel. There was almost no winner. Most of the time, both sides suffered great losses. Whoosh! At this moment, Hualing Tian walked towards a dilapidated ancient palace with an expectant look. He used his Fang Tian halberd to pry open some huge rocks. Gradually, a space appeared. The baleful aura inside was so dense that it made it hard for people to breathe. Hualing Tian covered his nose and carefully walked in. He discovered that there were 2 corpses inside. It was as if they had died together. In an instant, the other's head was pierced. No one was spared. One of the young men was holding a box in his left hand. It was covered in rust and looked as if it was about to rot. There were 3 words on the back of the sword in his hand, "Scorching Sun Sword." It was extremely sharp. Even after countless years, it still couldn't hide its domineering aura. The Scorching Sun Sword directly pierced into the enemy's head. However, the enemy's sword pierced through his head from between his eyebrows. Both of them died at the same time. The shockwave caused the entire palace to collapse. The 2 of them supported each other and didn't fall. Their eyes were filled with unwillingness and anger. Hualing Tian happily tried to take the iron box from the Scorching Sun Sword's owner. However, even though he was dead, his iron bones still locked the iron box tightly. It was as if there was an incredible treasure inside. Hee, looks like I got a treasure. Hualing Tian had been following Sovereign Yi for a long time. His personality had become extremely wretched. He liked to take advantage of others. Now that there was a treasure, he would definitely check it out first. If he couldn't use it, he would give it to others. If he could use it, he would naturally enjoy it for himself. Needless to say, this philosophy was taught to him by Sovereign Yi. After a long time, Hualing Tian still couldn't take the iron box. However, he didn't dare to destroy the Yen tribe's corpse. He could only pull the Scorching Sun Sword out of the enemy's corpse. Then he laid the Scorching Sun Sword's owner flat on the ground. He used his strength to pull the iron box out. The iron box wasn't sealed in time. The Scorching Sun Sword's owner seemed to want to escape the battlefield with it. Unfortunately, he didn't manage to escape in time. Hualing Tian opened the box and found a blood-red bottle. The bottle was sealed with an ancient array. There were a few words on it, but he didn't recognize them. However, if Yi Qinghan was here, he would definitely recognize them. Yan Emperor's Blood Essence. 3 drops. This was the prize that the Scorching Sun Sword's owner, Yen Yang, had won in the competition. It was a pity that he didn't manage to use it in time, so he kept it until now. This bottle was priceless outside, not to mention the god's blood inside it. The ancestral blood of the Yen tribe was 100% pure. Hualing Tian didn't even think about it. He didn't know what was inside, but he thought that since Yen Yang valued it so much, it definitely wasn't a defective product. After removing the seal, golden red blood droplets rolled inside the bottle. Every drop of Yen Emperor's blood was a peerless treasure. Hualing Tian wasn't greedy. He poured out a drop of blood essence and sealed the bottle. Then he swallowed the drop of Yen Emperor's blood essence. Asterisk gulp. Asterisk as soon as the blood essence entered his stomach, a vast energy broke through his bottleneck, breaking through the first layer and reaching the second layer. The vast memories of the Yen tribe contained cultivation experience and bloodline power, causing Hualing Tian to fall unconscious. Asterisk bang. Asterisk, fuck, what did I eat? Hualing Tian didn't even have time to react before he fell to the ground. His head was full of bumps and he fainted. He didn't even know what he ate. He was indeed a pure young man who was poisoned by Sovereign Yi. The vast bloodline power covered Hualing Tian's own bloodline, purifying, assimilating, and changing it. Even the inheritance of his soul was distorted. However, his memories weren't destroyed. The Yen Emperor's blood essence. Even Yi Qinghan probably couldn't withstand 2 drops, but this guy swallowed 1 drop without knowing what it was. Bai Shaoxing and Yan Yunbei, who had just arrived at the outer area, heard the strange noise inside. When they entered, they were shocked and quickly called out to Yi Qinghan and the rest. Whoosh! Yi Qinghan entered the inner area. When he saw the 2 corpses and Hualing Tian lying in the ancient palace, he was shocked. Yi Qinghan waved his hand and took the red jade bottle. When he saw the words on it, his pupils shrank. He opened the bottle and saw that there was indeed 1 drop missing. At this moment, the Yen tribe bloodline in Hualing Tian's body was extremely rich and pure. It was even purer than Yi Qinghan's. You bastard, you didn't even know what it was and ate it. Now, you're going against the heavens and changing your own bloodline. You're carrying a burden of hatred for nothing. Yi Qinghan was speechless. He kept the jade bottle and used his human energy to help Hualing Tian heal the blood clots in his body. Only then did Hualing Tian escape with his life. At this moment, Sovereign Yi and Gu Jiutian arrived at the palace. When they saw Hualing Tian's Yen tribe bloodline, they were stunned. He's also from the Yen tribe? Gu Jiutian took a deep breath. He could see the purity of Hualing Tian's Yen tribe bloodline. This kind of bloodline didn't lose to the ancient god bloodline. If nurtured well, he could be in existence comparable to a master god. Boss, how did this guy become a member of the Yen tribe? Sovereign Yi asked in confusion. Yi Qinghan snorted coldly and rebuked. You taught him well. He didn't even know what it was before putting it in his mouth. Fortunately, he wasn't greedy and only ate 1 drop of the Flame Emperor's blood essence. Otherwise, he would have died here. Sovereign Yi slapped his head and said angrily, This little bastard, he didn't even keep the treasure for me and ate it himself. Chapter 26:11. Supremacy. Yi immediately felt that this guy was unreliable for not telling him in advance. Yi Qinghan was speechless. Fortunately, he discovered it in advance. Otherwise, the 3 drops of Flame Emperor's blood essence would have been wasted by these 2 guys. Slap. Yi Qinghan gave Supremacy Yi a slap on the back of his head and said in a muffled voice, Get lost. Don't even think about getting the Flame Emperor's blood essence. Since Supremacy Yi couldn't get the Flame Emperor's blood essence, he could only stare at Hualing Tian. He felt that this guy was an immortal medicine that could make one immortal after eating it. He was also glad that Hualing Tian was still unconscious. Otherwise, he wouldn't dare to hang out with Supremacy Yi anymore. After a long time, Hualing Tian slowly woke up and looked at everyone with a confused face. He scratched his head and said in puzzlement, "Why am I confused? What did I eat?" Slap. Yi Qinghan gave Hualing Tian another slap on the back of his head. He was so angry that he was speechless. "You eat something you don't know. Are you a glutton? You're crazy," Yi Qinghan said in exasperation. Hualing Tian was very innocent. He had strictly followed Supremacy Ye's teachings. Of course, he would enjoy what he could enjoy first. The rest was for his brothers to enjoy. I saw that the fragrance was assailing my nose. It should be some sort of immortal medicine. So, I tried it first to see if it was poisonous. If it wasn't, then I could give it to you. Hualing Tian said flatteringly. Kakaka. Supreme Yi was furious. He kicked Hualing Tian's knee and roared, "You ungrateful bastard. I taught you that you should enjoy the benefits first, but you should also think about boss. You've forgotten about me when you saw the treasure." Yi Qinghan took a deep breath and patted his head. He felt that talking to these two guys would make him angry to death. "You two get out of here." Yi Qinghan was furious and said angrily. "Okay." Supremacy Yi and Hualing Tian shrunk their heads and quickly ran out. Yi Qinghan shook his head and looked at the two corpses and the solar scorching sword. He took off their divine rings and grabbed the solar scorching sword, picking out the enemy's godhead. Godhoods were almost indestructible. They could only be stored away to ensure that they didn't wander outside. Yin Yang's divine ring was of a very high grade. It was actually able to store a godhead within it. Moreover, it hadn't been destroyed even until now. It should be the Yen clan's most precious treasure, a top-grade treasure belonging to a tribe. Yi Qinghan casually acknowledged him as his master, then buried Yin Yang's corpse outside. At this moment, the Qi of God Ferocious was getting thicker and thicker. The Qi of God Ferocious underground was especially severe. They could not stay any longer. Yi Qinghan led everyone to leave the lost Holy Land. So much time had passed, and the fog had dissipated. The sea was calm and tranquil as far as the eye could see. With Gu Jiutian leading the way, it took them several years to return to the northern Divine Island. The moment Yi Qinghan stepped onto the northern Divine Island, he felt a strange atmosphere. Everyone in the inner sect was smiling from ear to ear. Fan Yin, on the other hand, was like a celebrity. She was praised by everyone as if she had done a great deed. Even the older generation of the insane sect was smiling, as if they had forgotten what she had done. Yi Qinghan looked at Emperor Yi from afar. She seemed to have noticed him as well. She was the first to stand up and look in the direction of the northern sea. After that, the Green Lotus Sword Immortal also noticed Yi Qinghan and the others. Yi Qinghan was filled with doubts. Previously, everyone in the insane sect, except for Emperor Yi, was indifferent to Fan Yin. They even had a trace of resentment in their hearts. Today, their attitudes had completely changed. Whoosh! Yi Qinghan, Gu Jiutian, Yin Yunbei, and the others landed in the inner sect's encampment. They had reaped a bountiful harvest this time, so they were especially relaxed. "Boss is back," everyone said excitedly. Yi Qinghan smiled and nodded. "He's back. I wonder what happened? Why are you all so happy?" Everyone looked at Fan Yin. Fan Yin's face was flushed, and her fingertips were constantly rubbing together. She seemed a little nervous. It seemed that she didn't know if she would be forgiven by Yi Qinghan this time. Emperor Yi looked excited. He wanted to resolve the grudge between Yi Qinghan and Fan Yin the most. Now that the insane sect's inner sect had forgiven Fan Yin, it all depended on Yi Qinghan's attitude. Emperor Yi reached out and grabbed Fan Yin's jade-like hand. She was so nervous that she didn't know where to put it. He said with a face full of praise, "Husband, take a guess." Yi Qinghan shrugged and smiled faintly. "Do you think I'm a half-immortal? That I can predict the heavens and earth with a pinch of my fingers? You can't, but our senior sister Fan Yin can. She has mastered the 8 trigram star technique and discovered the connection between the stars and the 8 trigrams. Through the movement of the stars, she can predict good or bad luck. In the years that you were gone, She predicted 3 disasters. The first time was when the revered dragon Marquis sent several big shots to attack the inner sect. The second time was when the Taijiang celestial clan sent 2 golden immortal level big shots and hundreds of experts to the northern divine island. If not for senior sister Fan Yin's foresight, we would have been prepared and called back Gu Qingyu, Jiang Jingtian, and the other big brothers, as well as the 300,000 ancient killing gods. The northern divine island would have been destroyed long ago, Emperor Yi said excitedly. Yi Qinghan's eyes flashed. He looked at Fan Yin and couldn't help but tremble. If not for Fan Yin, the insane sect would have been finished. No wonder the older generation of the insane sect had gathered here. Even Jiang Jingtian and Gu Qingyu, who were fighting outside, had returned to the inner sect. Yi Qinghan muttered to himself and looked at Fan Yin. The heavenly Grandmaster Grand Sage also had the ability to predict the heavens and was proficient in divination. Now that Fan Yin used the 8 trigrams and the movement of the stars, her divination was even more accurate. Fan Yin lowered her head. She had saved the insane sect and 30,000 inner sect disciples 3 times. She didn't know if she would be forgiven by Yi Qinghan. Yi Qinghan's fingertips trembled. He looked up at Jiang Jingtian and Gu Qingyu. Their eyes were silent and they nodded repeatedly, hoping that he would let go of the past. Boss, our lives were saved by her. Senior sister Fan Yin doesn't care about our gratitude. You have to repay her for us, Jiang Jingtian said with a smile. That's right. Please repay this favor for us. Dozens of the older generation of the Kuang sect shouted one after another. Yi Qinghan grinned and reached out to hug Fan Yin. With this hug, all the enmity between them was gone, and it was no longer a knot in the Kuang Zong's heart. Senior sister, thank you for saving the insane sect. Yi Qinghan hugged Fan Yin and said softly. Fan Yin hid in Yi Qinghan's arms and tears fell like rain. Although she had stayed in the insane sect all these years, she felt tormented every day. She felt guilty, regretful, and was looked down upon by others. Only Emperor Yi supported her. Otherwise, she would have chosen to leave long ago and never have anything to do with the insane sect. However, after enduring for thousands of years, she finally got her reward. How could Yi Qinghan not sense her emotional fluctuations? Her silent sobbing had soaked the shroud. Clap, clap. Yi Qinghan gently patted Fan Yin's back and comforted her. Senior sister, it's all in the past. You don't owe the insane sect anything. The insane sect owes you, and so do I. From today onwards, you belong to the insane sect, and the insane sect belongs to you. Fan Yin had waited for many years for this sentence. After hearing it, her tears overflowed and she could not vent them. She cried out loudly to vent the helplessness and loneliness in her heart all these years. Boom. The people of the insane sect saluted in unison. Welcome back, senior sister Fan Yin. Jiang Jingtian and the others pounded their chests with their right fists and stood straight. Welcome back, senior sister Fan Yin. Boom. The 300,000 insane sect members were even more imposing. The war drums roared and the military salute was magnificent. The 30,000 inner sect disciples who were already prepared lined up outside the insane sect's camp. Welcome back, Elder Fan Yin. This salute represented that the insane sect had forgiven Fan Yin. Yen Yunbei smiled. He was no less old than Fan Yin. Naturally, he would not follow Yi Qinghan and call her senior sister. Fan Yin, welcome back. Boom. Yen Yunbei straightened his body and pounded his chest with his right fist. Fan Yin felt a sense of happiness that she had never felt before. Everything was worth it. Being forgiven by the insane sect seemed to be more important than being forgiven by Yi Qinghan. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.